Hello and welcome back to Pinoys versus the World. My name is Harald Hilseth, and as you can tell, I am not outside and I am not with Chris, but today I am here to talk to you all about one of our old episodes that we're re-releasing on the YouTube channel. YouTube has not always been our forte. We've had an RSS feed for many months, going on a few years now, of what Pinoys versus the World has evolved into, and now obviously doing video. We don't have to, we need to figure a way of getting some of our favorite episodes off of the RSS feed and now onto our YouTube channel. So what better way to start than with one of our favorite shows of the years, Andor, Diego Luna, Genevieve O'Reilly, Denise Goff, Stellan Skarsgård, across the board, obviously all show run by Tony Gilroy. It's just one of the best shows we've seen all year, some of the best Star Wars you've ever seen. And as you'll hopefully see in this nearly a 3-hour pod about one of our favorite shows, Chris and I go into everything that we can about not only season 2 that just come out in April, but a little bit about season 1, plenty of spoilers ahead. But this is something we want to keep doing on the channel, and we cannot think of a better show to start with reposting some of our old content here onto YouTube than with Andor. So please enjoy this mammoth episode in honor and going through the pantheon of episodes that we got from Andor. One of the best Star Wars things we have gotten. So please enjoy this podcast from the Pinoys versus Vault. And welcome back to another episode of Pinoys versus the World. My name is Harald Hilseth.
My name is Chris Ankiko.
And we're here today, Chris, to talk about one of the best shows of the year, Andor. Season 2 just finished. Its finale aired earlier this week. And we're also here to talk a little bit about Season 1 as well, because we weren't doing this podcast together when that dropped. But 2 spectacular seasons of television. Andor as a whole, one of our favorite Star Wars things yet. And Chris, probably going to be a megapod. I know you've got a hard cut. We put a hard cut on this episode. We're going to try not to go over our normal allotted time. But today, we just want to jump right into talking a bit about Andor Season 1 to begin our conversation. It's going to be full spoilers pretty much for the entire episode. You're going to get a far more from us about Season 2 after the little break. But we love Season 1 as well and feel the need to talk about it a bit. But before I throw it over to Chris to get us started chatting a bit about Andor Season 1, you can find us at Pinoys Versus and on all podcasting platforms. And shout out Wikipedia and the Star Wars Declassified series on YouTube for being a huge resource for me in particular to prep for today's Megapod. But Chris, I've talked enough to begin a podcast of one of our favorite shows, as I've said 3 times now, not only in Star Wars canon, but probably just in this prestige TV category. Andor Season 1, take it away, buddy.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's the key phrase right there is Andor is prestige TV. Like Star Wars has really never been, obviously, Star Wars is a more of a space fantasy than science fiction, and it certainly has never been political, like a political drama as big as Andor is. Most of the main focus for Star Wars is being swashbuckling, adventure, lightsabers, Jedi, the Force, all that stuff. There are obviously, especially in the prequels, a lot of political allusions. Conceptually, it works, but execution-wise, it doesn't quite work. I think we talked a little bit about that in our Revenge of the Sith review. But for Andor, it's a little different because it is about the politics of the universe and why the Empire is an entity that needs to be stopped. So Season 1 is basically Cassian on the road from like roach to butterfly. That's how Tony Gilroy kind of pitched it. And that's kind of what he wanted it to be about. The initial pitch for the show from Disney was that it was going to be a Cassian K2SO adventure series where they'd go across the galaxy doing missions for the Rebel Alliance. But Gilroy found very quickly that was a fatal flaw in the concept because the show would run quickly out of runway because K2SO is a piece of gear. He keeps calling him in interviews like a piece of gear. He's a difficult character to bring around because he's an Imperial droid. You have to explain away his presence with these 2 random people not in stormtrooper suits every time he's on screen. And he's just very comic relief, like he is in Rogue One. And he's just sort of a hard character to take around all the time. So instead, he pitched the show that we did get, and it took Disney about a year to come around to it. But eventually, they relented and let him do his thing, which I thought was interesting to hear about. I think he talked about this in an NPR podcast. But Cassian has two things that sort of set him on his path in the series: is killing the two corpos in the very first scene, and then having an Imperial Star Path unit in his possession that he wants to sell. They both put pressure on him to do certain things, and after he's traced back to, Ferrex in accordance with the crime, and then Luthen finds him because he's good at stealing from the Empire. He's starting to kind of take his first steps into the larger world, as Obi-Wan said in A New Hope. But at this point, he only wants to steal stuff so he can make money by selling his goods. But because of what happens to him during the season, he's encouraged to think about the galaxy that he lives in very differently. The raid on Aldhani, reading the manifesto from a character named Nemik, to being arrested and imprisoned for no reason at all afterward, to coming home and seeing his planet occupied by the Empire. He becomes radicalized through like all of these experiences, and his arc is very indicative of the goal of the entire show, which is to turn the Empire from just the bad guys to a regime that the audience legitimately has reasons to hate. Like, these people need to be stopped because what they're doing simply isn't right. And that's the thing that that is the main goal of the show, is to elaborate on why a rebel alliance would form because of the Empire. So that's where I'll start us off.
Man, I'm just so happy to have you on the pod, Chris, because I could not have said that better myself. This two peas in a pod right there. I am just going to echo everything you just said, because there's no lead up to just this general conversation about season one that I could ever begin. And that's why I appreciate the background of it, not only for the listeners, but to remind myself of even some things that, no matter how much I was going back to kind of that feeling that season one gave myself. And I'll shout out Jonas here, because this is kind of our, one of our shows, one of our many shows that we'll make sure to watch together. Right. And when Andor was announced, however many years ago now, like you just gave a little bit of background about how it was pitched to Disney. But what do you even, Chris, what do you even remember from when you heard that we were making a show about Cassian Andor, that it was going to be called Andor? And what kind of streak were we on too? Because this came out in late 2022 into 23, and the Disney Plus stuff just hadn't, it was so hit or miss. We probably got some of the better Marvel stuff, but even then, we're starting to get fatigue. At this point, what Mando season 1 and 2 have happened. It's Book of Boba Fett's a little iffy, but Andor season 1, like having that announced, Chris, even before we got to see it, like what was the feeling you were getting? Like how are we going to make a whole show about Cassian Andor from like not even like the main, arguably, like maybe I'll look at it differently for Rogue One, but not even the main character of Rogue One, right? Like Cassian Andor, like what a guy to base his entire show around.
No, you kind of hit the nail on the head in terms of the surrounding context with all the different series. Because I think we were just coming off a little bit off Mando season 2 and the Book of Boba Fett. And the Book of Boba Fett was a very like underwhelming ending. And they definitely let Mando, when he enters midway through the season, as well as Luke Skywalker, overshadow Boba Fett himself. Boba Fett is a much stronger character in the second season of The Mandalorian than he is in his own show. He's very relegated to the background in like every way, especially once Mando shows up, because he's way more interesting. But going back to Andor, yeah, I was really not that enthused for the show because I just assumed it was going to be yet another version of The Mandalorian, or just a sort of a show that was kind of a throwaway. Like, this is a character that no one cared about in Rogue One. I don't think people had much faith that the show would be any good because of all, like, even in Rogue One, like all the talk about the reshoots and things like that. There wasn't too much hype around it. But once the show starts and you watch the first, even from the opening scene of the first episode when he kills the two corpos, like I talked about, I thought that was just going to be like, showing that Cassian is like some sort of badass or something, that he's like, he doesn't take shit from anyone, and he's just going to kill these two guys because they tried to mess with him or something like that. And it was going to be not much of an issue for him, because that's normally how these Star Wars things work. Like, they kill people without consequence and they move on to their next adventure. But committing that crime has major consequences for the rest of the show.
Consequences, right?
Because then it sort of Cyril who's another kind of like, he's kind of the mirror character to Cassian. He catches wind of him and tracks him to Ferrix, like his home planet. And, it's sort of responsible for Imperial occupation. And he's just obsessed with finding this guy because, we'll definitely get into Cyril later, but, the whole like law and order, this man needs to be stopped and brought to justice. And his reputation as a criminal and a thief is what sort of gets him on, again, on the path that he's on. But you don't realize that until you get more into the show, and you realize that nothing in the show happens without consequences, which is something that I really respected from the jump.
It feels like it's been so long. Not only feels so long, but it has been so long since Cyril Karn was just a character that was a little bit concerned with the tailor of his suit and the way that he is not directly perceived in the Empire, that he looks at, very with high regard as like a true protector of the galaxy. Like Emperor Palpatine is him, right? Like whether or not he's ruling through fear or other folks really believe in what what he stands for and that ultimate power. Eventually he becomes the Senate. But even at this point in Andor, season 1 happens 5 years before the Battle of Yavin. So we have season 1 pretty much completely taking place over the course of 12 calendar months. And a lot happens in those 12 months. I mean, from the beginning, this show is strong. It's nearly perfect. It's nearly a perfect season of television, in my opinion. And it's half of the show, half of the freaking show, because we only get 2 seasons of iconic arcs. Something the show does incredibly well, consistently from beginning to end. High production value, attention to detail. I mean, the costume design and the designs of the sets alone, Chris, are Emmy worthy, or something that will elevate this project from something that is just like a nerd based IP, like a Lucasfilms idea, to something that I think anyone can enjoy because of all of these reasons, right? The music is outstanding. Like there's a lot of thematic, there's a lot of thematic connection between this show's unique sense and style of music and how it rhymes off of John Williams' score from the original series. This continues on and on and on and on with, I talk about all those points above, but this show also would be nothing without its character-driven stories and how that's the roots of, the rebellion and suffocating control of the Empire, and really like the morally gray area that exists between those two sides. But I think everything from the costumes to the music, everything in between, it makes for nearly a perfect season of television. And I think we'll get into a little bit about that here in a second.
Yeah, I got a couple notes about like the production and the music. Looking at we were talking about sort of the previous shows that were released. So Andor came out late 2022, and earlier that year, the Book of Boba Fett finished its 1 season, and then Obi-Wan had its 6-episode run a few months after that. So it ended in June, and then Andor came out in September. These are 2 shows that, again, they're based on existing IP, very strong IP, key characters, legacy characters, and they both use the volume for a lot of their sets and things like that, using John Williams cues, all this other stuff for the music. But Andor, obviously, it's real sets. Everything is very tangible. That was sort of a big thing, big priority for the crew, is that you could reach out and touch everything. It felt like you were there. And then in terms of the music, the composer is Nicholas Britell, who I love because Succession is my favorite TV show ever. Definitely a lot of echoes in this show to Succession as well, the political nature of it. And so it feels very fitting that Nicholas Britell was brought on to do this. And when I saw that, I had an inkling. I had like a little bit of I can't say with certainty that I thought the show was going to be good, but I was like, wow, like they got him to do this. I just thought that was very interesting. That's definitely not a throwaway, pickup right there. Like Nicholas Britell, he does these very grounded in reality and like business politics. He did the score for The Big Short. He did it for Don't Look Up. He did it for The Underground Railroad with Barry Jenkins. He might have done Moonlight. I'm trying to remember. But either way, he's done a lot of very like grounded scores. So that kind of made me think this is going to be a more grounded show.
And little did you know at the moment that that's exactly what it was going to be for the entirety of its existence. This is almost a show because of all of those reasons too, that I wanted to prepare for this. We've talked about this in the past. I think we're huge Star Wars fans. If there's anything where the IP, curiosity between the two of us really aligns, it's this. It's everything that happens in a galaxy far, far away. But even I would be remiss if I didn't even just state now, before we get into all the details of why this is true. Like, my grandiose statement is I think this Andor seasons 1 and 2 together, especially, probably my favorite thing to come out of Star Wars. I mean, we could just jump right into Arc 1, chatting about why I think that. You really see, like you said, you've already set this up. Cassian Andor from the beginning of the show is on the run. And the last time any of us viewers had seen Andor is someone that we've only ever seen within a certain context in a single, really good movie. Like, I think Rogue One has aged better because of this show. And maybe we'll talk about Rogue One again one day and hopefully towards the end of this long pod. But Cassian himself, he's just a guy, Chris. And when he's just a guy going back to his group of people, being like, I just messed up. I need you to cover my back a little bit, right? Even Bix, at this point, Bix is not with Cassian. They're just friends. Actually, Bix is dating someone who eventually is going to give up Cassian because of some mark of jealousy or something ego filled in the middle of what we're like 15, 20 years into the rise of the Empire at this point, right? Like, they are solidly have their claws in many reaches, if not all reaches of the galaxy, out into the outer rim. So it seems petty in the moment, but these small stories end up just continuing to be small stories in a bigger, epic. It's its own way of telling not only the small stories, like Gilroy takes these small stories and kind of stacks them like Lego bricks along the way. And when you get to the end of the entire show, or even you can take each individual season at base value, I believe, obviously they're very connected. The endings connect to the next project, which connect to the next project, which then go into the original trilogy. But even something that starts out with Ferrix, and like you understand the importance of their culture, Cassian's relationship with Marva and little B2 emo, like these are the people that are all of Cassian Andor's world at the moment. And by the end of this first arc, there's just everything's hit the wall. People are dead. Tim is dead. Bix is devastated. Like, Brosso's got a cover for his boy, and Cassian meets up with Luthen Rael. Eventually is going to be one of my favorite characters, if not one of the most important characters in the story of the rebellion. In hindsight, now that this show is completely out, but Luthen meets Cassian through a connect through Bix. Like, this is how this is how this giant epic begins, is just in this little corner of the galaxy, Chris. But I do find the way Luthen and the way he enters this story to be really interesting. And I don't know if you remember what it was like to see this first arc 3 years ago, and what you even thought of Luthen, played brilliantly by Stellan Skarsgård over 2 seasons. If you even knew how important Luthen was going to be down the long run, like, kind of came in hot, and he provides Cassian with the choice, help me or kill me at the end of this perfect little arc to get us started.
The first meeting between Luthen and Cassian is so interesting because normally you think of that meeting as a, join the rebellion, like, join up with me. We're going to be comrades. We're in this together sort of thing. But for this first meeting, Luthen just wants Cassian to help him do this raid on Aldhani because he's good at stealing stuff. Like, he has the Imperial Star Path unit, which comes around even at the end of the show. But he's just so impressed with his track record of stealing from the Empire that he thinks he would be an asset to the mission. But you see later on that Luthen did not think of Cassian as someone who could join his crew. He's just a guy that we're going to sort of use and lose sort of thing. After this mission, we have to figure out what to do with him because we can't let him be around and know who Luthen is. And that kind of comes around, like, as we'll talk a little bit later in the season, that, like, there's concern about Cassian sort of leaking things or just being around there and, like, potentially getting captured and tortured and revealing the identities of all these rebel faction, at least the rebel factions that he's been exposed to. So initially, again, as we get into the second arc, as like the robbery mission on Aldhani, that is what they're sort of going in with. They're all very uneasy about Cassian being there, and he's got to be like, yeah, like, I'm just here, guys. But then he's got to say he's a mercenary and all this stuff. But he sort of meets a lot of people on that mission that expose him to different perspectives and like people that actually have purpose behind what they're doing. Like they're raiding the payroll for an entire imperial sector, and I believe that's what they're raiding. And he gets exposure again, like Nemec's manifesto. That's the main thing. Like all these people, there's a lot of the people that feel like, there's a bigger purpose to what they're doing, and Cassian does not feel that. But then he's on Aldhani, and I think one of the first like powerful scenes of the show is when a single TIE fighter flies extremely low, basically trying to like, I think probably to intimidate the people on the ground, like the sort of the general population. And there's even scenes where the officers talk about their strategy for sort of subjugating and intimidating and the population of the planet, so that they're basically powerless to do anything. Which again is another moment where you're like, oh, this is a different type of show for sure. But again, that whole exposure on Aldhani and that entire mission sort of exposes you to the scope of the Empire and how their sort of day-to-day operations on a planet, which I thought was interesting.
And that also comes into play again in season 2. Like the way that the Empire at this point in their tenure are being kind of portrayed by Gilroy and the team that created this. Obviously, a bit scarier, I think, a bit more real than they're ever portrayed as in any of the original trilogy movies. And obviously, you can't look back and be like, we were talking about this a couple days ago, right? We're coming up on 50 years of Star Wars. Can't look back to 1977 and really blame George Lucas or anyone for not thinking this far ahead. But I think it plays into the brilliance of the writing of the show, kind of how character driven it is, and how you can kind of write, kind of like how Gilroy has a lot of interviews where he talks a lot about how he really enjoys writing a show where and he says it in the context of Andor, obviously, a show where you know how it ends. Because then you can just, like he says, you can swing punches. You can really take big swings that play really, really well into like telling an exciting story. Because like where how it ends. Like let's fill the gaps, and you can fill these gaps on little planets. In the scope of things, and little settlements like the Ferric settlement, or again, like you're saying with the Aldhani, I don't even know if they call it a raid or just like a big mission, right? That's like the first big mission Cassian takes on for Luthen, like you were talking about. But I even want to take one, not to go a full step back, but another huge character in Arc 1 is Cyril Karn. And it kind of gets going. Like season 1 is a big Cyril season. Like we'll get into this in season 2 talk, but Cyril is incredibly important in season 2. I think season 2 has a lot to juggle. But in this moment, this is like really like the beginning of his time to shine in this show. And it like starts off a really complicated relationship with Cassian Andor, a man who will never know this man. We'll get to that point, right? There's a really good payoff for the relationship, a very one-sided relationship that someone like Cyril Karn has. Just a normal guy. He's just working as a police officer, right? And he picks up on a little bit of a discrepancy in some of the reports from the corpos that were killed by Andor. And for one reason or another, he's told, this is a little bit out of your jurisdiction. Step off a little bit, right? Like get back to tailoring your suit. But he just cannot give up in quote unquote the pursuit of justice in his eyes. And he's like, what do I have to do to suck up to the Empire to get up a little higher to really accomplish this goal and feel like a superhero? Cyril Karn is not special. This show like does not mince any words from the beginning of his introduction here. I would say the same about Dedra Meero as well. Dedra. There's the British pronunciation and how I want to say it in my head. We're gonna go with Dedra. But Dedra Meero.
It's Dedra.
It's Dedra.
Yeah.
Dedra Meero is also a character that just runs side by side with Cyril and is introduced very early on. Like their relationship as high up representatives of like in Dedra's case, ISB, right? And way lower down the ladder for Cyril Karn. They run hand in hand through Ferrix. And that's actually a huge part of this entire first season. Like Ferrix is the most important, I think, locale next to, the big jail scenes and what goes down in Ferrix or what ends up happening in the finale of season 1. But those two do not exist without each other. Cyril finds himself in a terrible place at the end of Arc 1, fired, people are dead. He didn't even see Andor, because they've met technically twice in this series, and the first time they meet is in a moment where Andor does not even care to ask for his name, just gets his gun and moves on to try to meet up with Luthen later on in that arc. But this all happens within the first 3 to 6 episodes. which I guess you could just look at as a fourth of the show. Just sets up everything perfectly.
Well, again, like I was sort of saying before, Andor and Cyril kind of mirror characters. I've heard this on some other like evaluations and discussions of the show, but they're sort of running again in parallel each other to each other. And by the end of the show, they're in completely different. They become sort of each other, but at the other stage of the journey. So at the beginning, Andor has no purpose, and by the end, he has tons of purpose. Cyril, because of again the crime that Cassian has committed, but also the way that his supervisors, his corpo supervisors, choose to cover it up instead of trying to pursue Cassian, kind of strengthens his resolve and being like, no, like I'm about justice. Like I want justice for these for my coworkers, for my comrades. And that's sort of his like his motivation to being like, okay, I need to preserve law and order on behalf of me and myself and the empire and our organization. And so that's kind of the way he wants to do it. He's like, I'm going to take this upon myself, and I'm going to discover, I'm going to figure it out. Whereas Andor, again, he's just kind of living by the skin of his teeth. And so yeah, those arcs become very interesting. And again, like Dedra is someone who she's trying to like, she's trying to get an edge however she can. And they're very, Cyril and Dedra are very similar in that way. So they're sort of made for each other. They're not quite sure about it yet. I mean, Cyril's definitely convinced that they're made for each other. But Dedra is like, please, like you're too obsessed. Like you, especially at the toward the end of the season, just like you're too obsessed. Like, please get away from me. And that's a very interesting like dynamic because you don't see a real. It kind of goes through the entire like theme of the show, like the entire like tone of the show is it feels very real. Like Cyril is like a stalker, like he is stalking Dedra, and it makes her very uncomfortable. Even though they're both sort of like weird and evil in their own ways, Cyril is just again he's being very like invasive of like everyone's time, but he believes that it's in like a noble pursuit, which is so interesting. He feels justified in almost everything he's doing, but it's very strange. He's a very weird guy.
He's just a weird guy. Like I probably calling him a galactic incel is probably too fucking like way too direct. But I mean, the way he acts around women, the way he acts around his mom, the way he acts around people that aren't Dedra and his mother are just so weird. And like the beats that his, the actor that plays Cyril kind of hits on, just I'm just here to believe that I'm watching a real interaction between a former police officer who's trying to do something good for the community, right? And this is what he's convinced himself. When at the end of the day, it's just kind of leading through terror, like the guy's empirical terror, and you're just like an officer of that fear, right? Even if you think like you're the hero in the moment. I mean, and we've talked a little bit about it off the hand or off the pod about how you've described this first arc to me as being not only Andor's first taste of the rebellion, but obviously Dedra and Cyril's first taste of the rebellion, many people's first taste of the rebellion. So when we end up getting to Aldhani, and I'm just going to skip right to basically the moment, like one of the big moments, and I think it's either the second episode of that arc, the Axe Forgets, or the Eye, but we'll just probably jump right to the Eye. Skeen, played by Eben Moss Backrack. We've got Nemik Manifesto. Nemik, our boy Nemik, Chris, like that manifesto continues to play a huge factor in this show up until the very end, both on screen and off screen, as it's described. What happens in Aldhani is something that, as every arc kind of portrays, is a moment that's critical. It is like mission critical to have Cassian experience. At this point, he's away from his mom Marva, he's away from Bix and Brasso, and even away from anyone on ISB directly, right? Like he is now just operating with Luthen for the first time, and to have this real, like you think this is the crew that's going to be here for most of at least this season, right? So when you get to the end where a couple of them die when everything goes wrong on the base, Aldhani, when the heist goes wrong, when Nemik gets crushed by cargo, just the nicest guy, the dude who's like the most genuinely my favorite character up until that point in the show, just kill him off in episode 6. And then Skeen to come across as this guy that was only in it for the money to begin with and was just offering up to Andor as someone else who, Cassian looked like someone that would have schemed with him. Then Cassian kills Skeen, and it's crazy. You're left with just Skeen and Vel and Cassian at the end of this arc. And I didn't know necessarily where they were going to go, because in season 1, these episodes were releasing weekly, Chris, versus how they were released in season 2. So when that hits, I'm at we're at the half point, and I'm just like, I have no clue where we're going, Chris. I have no idea where Tony Gilroy is going to take us in this random show that's finally got me hooked by this point, if it didn't already.
Well, what I like about Skeen and Nemec in particular is they're sort of extremes for Cassian to sort of live up to, because Skeen is the more depraved version of himself. He was only here for the money. He was only here to steal the payroll and then, like, kill everyone else or like leave, or I forgot whatever his strategy was. That Cassian was like, yeah, that's enough. We're not doing this. So he's like, even I feel like Cassian sees in himself like, I could go that low if I wanted to, but I'm not. Like, I have a little bit more respect for myself than that. But in Nemec, he sees like a true believer. He sees someone who is there because there's purpose to it. He's finishing writing his manifesto, and he's like, you know what? Like, I believe that we're not here just to steal this payroll. We're here to like make a bit of a statement, like in our own way. And he's exposed to both these perspectives, and I don't think it really registers for him in that moment. Like you said, like that crew is not the final crew. A lot of them die, and that's sort of, again, sort of defying the expectations of normal Star Wars, where you get a crew and you just see them to the end because everyone's invulnerable in Star Wars. But in this one, they're all just like real people. They have their own views about things. They have their own motivations, but also they can't, no Force users, no people with remarkable abilities or strength. It's just like the TIE fighter like intimidates them. That's the one thing about like the original trilogy and all the other shows, where it's like the power levels are pretty much equal. Like, you have a dark Force user, you have a light Force user. An army of TIE fighters is met with an army of X-Wings. What does it look like to the normal person that's trying to do a thing? In this case, do a small raid, where it's like you're going into a base with a bunch of stormtroopers, a few TIE fighters, and you have nothing but, a few blasters, some sticks, basically. What happens when normal people try to raid an imperial settlement? And it's like, bad things are going to happen because you don't have an army. You're not ready.
Well, you're not ready, and you have to rely on little sects and little pockets of the galaxy like Luthen. And this is what makes Luthen so important. He is the guy that, maybe not the glue guy, right? Like in this story, he's the glue guy. However many Luthens there were that were as important as him, probably not many, if not him being like the top dog. But at this point, 5 years before Yavin puts out all of the forces against the Emperor and Darth Vader in Episode 6, Yavin doesn't exist. Like, rebellion is scarce. It is spread out throughout the galaxy. And when you're in a situation like this, all you can rely on is someone who's going to deceive you. A former stormtrooper or a former Imperial Force member who you have to doubt his reasoning. Nemec, almost a far too naive character in his own right. And part of his manifesto that I really enjoy a lot, and we're probably going to bring up some quotes throughout today's episode, because that's the bread and butter of the show, is the dialogue and the character interactions. But in his manifesto that spread throughout the galaxy after this moment, and Cassian is the first person, I think him and Vel are the first two people to listen to it after everyone's passed away or been killed at this point. His manifesto in the middle goes along the lines of, remember that the frontier of the rebellion is everywhere, and even the smallest act of insurrection pushes our lines forward. And from that point forward, you see examples of this in every single episode up until the series finale. But this is almost not enough, Chris, to get Cassian completely sold on the rebellion. He's like, I'm out. What he just experienced was so damn traumatic and unexpected, and something that maybe Luthen planned for a bit. You know what I mean? Like the craziness and I don't know, maybe not the crazy, zany attitude that Luthen may bring to certain episodes and certain scenes when he's playing a different character on Coruscant, or if he's just playing himself with fellow rebels, right, who are throughout the galaxy that he's trying to put together like a team. He is just done. So where does he go? He goes to Miami. He goes to Miami Vice. Miami, I don't even know the actual name, but I'm just going to call it Miami in universe of the galaxy. Just to this beach town resort where he just ends up getting captured for a BS reason and is thrown into a federal prison pretty much on Narkina 5. One of the most important arcs, again, in Star Wars, in my opinion. But to go and, as you find out eventually in the arc, to go build parts for the Death Star. Like that's what's another really interesting glue piece between each of these arcs and all of these episodes, all 24 episodes. Chris, is we know this is leading to the Death Star. How was the Death Star built? It was built with prison labor. Like, no surprise there. And it's really, we get introduced to a lot of really good characters, but in this episode in particular, the first episode on the Narkina 5 arc, we get introduced to Kino Loy, played by Andy Serkis. Two characters in Star Wars so far, Chris. Narkina 5, when I watched it first time, at the very end, one way out, I was crying, I was screaming. This brought out emotions in me. I did not think a show like Andor could. And I'm curious to hear what your feelings were coming out of all three of these episodes, but particularly the final, the final hoorah, and as they escape from Narkina 5 at the end of it all, right? You have to get from point A to B somehow. And how did that play out for you?
Well, yeah, it's interesting. Again, I just want to go back to how he initially gets in there, because I rewatched the scene just before we recorded it. He's just walking. And a shore trooper just takes offense to him for no reason. He just goes, "Hey, why are you looking around?" He's like, "I'm not looking around anywhere." It's like, "Are you trying to run?" I was like, "I'm not running." So the shore trooper is trying to justify arresting him because all these other people around him are trying to run away. And so he just kind of makes a judgment that he looks like those people and then he should be arrested. And then he goes to the court and the judge is like, "This used to be a 6-month sentence. It's now a 6-year sentence." And again, he's swept away in this so quickly. It's just like they picked him off the street for no reason and was just like, what's going on here? And then all of a sudden he's in this very, like, ironically very clean and sterile prison where he is made to do very specific work. It's not just like a prison where you just like rot away and you sit around. It's like, you're working on something, and Cassian is very frustrated because he's like, "What are we doing here? Like, what are we working on?" And then when you go back to your quarters and you go to sleep, if you try to escape or even like walk to the bathroom, you're electrocuted and you die. The floor is lava, basically. So it's basically they're so like bolted down to their work. Eventually, they figure out that you're never released from this prison. Like, they never let you out because someone was theoretically released, and then he was brought back to work another floor. People found out, the guards killed everybody, and so the whole like how many guards are working, like the no more than 12, like the Andy Serkis thing. It's like, he's been in the prison. Kino Loy's been in the prison for so long that he believes that he is going to, like, because he's worked so hard, that he's going to get out. But then once he hears that story, he's like, "Oh," because Cassian is basically saying to him, like, "I don't think that's how it's going to work here." And Andy Serkis is so like set in that, like, "Yeah, no, I'm going to be rewarded. They're going to let me out." And then when he realizes that, no, it's not going to happen, then it becomes like a determination. It's like, yeah, like the Empire is going to try to screw you from all sides. It's like, rather die trying to get out than just live here and let them kill me after getting all this labor out of me. So yeah, it's so interesting to see like that, like a labor camp for the Death Star. It's so interesting because, again, I just that's the biggest part about the show is that the Death Star becomes just, it goes from big planet weapon to something that was built on the backs of lots of people who were very unwilling to do the work that it took to make a weapon that destroys planets, and very unaware, oblivious of it.
And far too often, if you're even shown a little bit of resistance, especially if you're just feeling like you're on an island, like someone like Kino Loy probably felt like he was going to spend, like you said, originally, before finding out that someone came back, right? And that truly no one here is ever getting out. But you've got not only Kino Loy in a group trying to meet quota, you've got Melshi from Rogue One, going to play forward, plays a moment here in sharing the pain and understanding, and also, someone from this jail that can go out and tell people the stories of how horrific it is to end up in basically empirical prison, right? Prison where you have the worst of the worst serving as wardens. You have basically no room to mess up, and what they're all basically hands up. There's a lot of consequences for not meeting that quota to keep the Death Star in line with completion, like in a timeline that the Emperor wants, that Orson Krennic wants. Played by Ben Mendelsohn, who just comes back and kills it in every single scene that he's in. He's in less than 4 of the episodes in total, but that man is killing it as well. You see in the episode prior to Kino Lloyd finally making the switch that even the oldest man in their group died before he had an opportunity to make it off of that damn rock. And that's what leads us to one of the best episodes of TV I'd seen that year, and probably one of the best moments in Star Wars is the one way out episode where Kino and Cassian and the whole group of folks that they can get out of there safely make it out, and they successfully stage a coup against their captors. Really, at the end of the day, they are not in no righteous jail. They are not in a place where most of the people there deserve even a little bit of a consequence. It is just forced labor, and they're escaping that capture. And to have it be a situation where Keelan Lloyd risked everything in that one moment, and then found out the only way, Chris, that you could. What's the only way, Chris? I'm just gonna leave this to you, that you can
can't
jump
swim.
off.
He can't swim. You got to jump off and swim.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's that. Oh man, the way my heart dropped to my stomach and out of my body when that happened. And what choice does Cassian have but to just get? Well, he has no choice. He's pushed off. He doesn't even jump off of the edge there. Whether or not he wanted to try to pull Kino with him, be like, "Look, man, we'll save you. We'll get you to the bay that we can see in the distance." But he doesn't even get a choice. He has 1 second, Chris, before he's just basically accidentally shoved off with the rest of the people just trying to get off of that rock.
Yeah, I mean, you basically summed it up. I mean, by the end of that experience, he sort of has a better idea of what he might do. He's not fully there. He's not fully convinced until he returns to Ferrix and sees what happens there. But through all of his experiences, again, like I was saying at the top, he's starting to think like, okay, this is not right. This isn't right. He's sort of now evolved past. I'm just going to steal from the Empire to make money and hang out on a beach, because he tried that. He stole from the Empire to try to hang out on a beach, and they arrested him anyways for no reason. So he just knows now that that's not an option. And Marva, his mom, wouldn't want that to be an option, as we'll talk about later with her whole speech after she dies. But yeah, it's just at a point where he knows there's no turning back.
Probably a perfect place to start talking about our final arc, a really important one for our favorite sister of Ferrix, Marva Andor, Cassian's adoptive mother, a beloved figure in Ferrix. Whether or not she acknowledged it until her final speech that we're going to get to here in a second, her brilliant monologue. Marva has always been kind of an unintentional member of the rebellion, and has always encouraged Cassian to what? Basically stop running from, I don't want to call it destiny. Like, it's really insinuated later in season 2 that Cassian's probable and, as we know, likely death march towards wherever he's going to end up dying, trying to stop the Death Star, help the rebellion, kill everyone on the first Death Star and destroy that structure. You would never know that one of the most important parts that got us to where Luke Skywalker is blowing that thing up is Marva giving a speech where she can't even look at her own son because she's passed away without Andor knowing. Cassian escapes that terrible prison only to return to the news that his mother has died. And all he has of her is this final speech that the entire town gets to see. Shout out B2, a real one. B2 deserved more, I will say it. That droid deserved better treatment from everyone around him, except for Brasso. I think Brasso had a soft spot in his heart, especially for B2. But B2 emo goes into the middle. B2
the
emu. You feel me?
Yeah.
We're going to keep that one in.
Yeah, absolutely. No, absolutely we are.
B2 goes into the middle of the square when they're hosting Marva's final Ferrix funeral. There is Imperial forces far too aggressive for a funeral. And this is where Dedra is on the planet at this point. This is where somehow Cyril has found his way back onto this planet. This is where even Dr. Gorst is going through ridiculously terrible forms of torture on the people of Ferrix.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say, like, again, this is where everything comes to a head, like you were sort of alluding to. Everyone has traced Cassian and Marva, like they're related. Like, Ferrix is where we need to be to catch all these people. Like, Dedra and Cyril are like, this funeral is going to happen, and they want it to happen because Dedra wants to find Andor. She knows that he's most likely going to come back, And when he does, we're going to get him. Like, we're going to kill him or arrest him. I forgot exactly what the primary motivation was. But then you get Luthen and Vel and I believe Cinta, and they're all there to kill Cassian because, again, Cassian knows the identities of all the people on the Aldani raid. And so, because he has not fully committed to joining yet and they haven't spoken to him, they feel like they need to take him out. So everyone wants a piece of Cassian at this point. The community of Ferrix, the rebels, the Empire, they all want him because he has done something to all of them that basically justifies, in their minds, getting rid of him in some way or blaming him. Because I know the people in Ferrix blamed Cassian and him returning for the increased Imperial presence. So everything definitely comes to a boiling point. It's so great how the story ends up going to Ferrix, and then it sort of mobilizes everyone for the final. I guess we'll sort of get into it. Just the speech where Marva's basically like, we need to fight the Empire. We've been sleeping. We need to wake up. This oppression is happening to us, and if it's going to happen to us, it's going to happen to more places. So we have to stand up right here, right now. And then the Empire's got their riot gear, they got their riot shields, and the funeral. I know the people on Ferrix, they start the funeral early to sort of catch the Empire off guard, so they can't fully get their forces in position. And they do the speech, they don't interfere with it, and then once Marva in the speech kind of does the call to action, then everyone starts sort of just fighting in the street. And this is the first scene, I think, in Star Wars, one of the first scenes in Star Wars where the stormtroopers feel very intimidating. Like, the stormtroopers, like, they do talk, they do like their, occasional banter throughout the rest of the show. But this is a scene where they're just like, they're stone-faced, they go to work, and they just start mowing people down. Like, it's just like, this is what Ben Kenobi in the first movie sort of alludes to, like, only Imperial stormtroopers are so precise after they kill Uncle Owen, Aunt Beru, all these Jawas and stuff like that. You see the actual, like, destructive potential of these faceless people with blasters. Like, that's the army. That's the army of the Empire. And you kind of see it. It's like, they're trying to basically exterminate these people on Ferrix because they're trying to speak up. And again, this is the first time where you really see the Empire doing an Empire thing to normal people.
It gives you the feeling that if you could have jumped through that screen, would you not have backed up the people of Ferrix, the fine people of Ferrix out there fighting the Empire? I mean, you already stole the word out of my mouth. I'm here reminding myself of the best parts of Marva's speech, and for her to just end it by saying fight the Empire, like, she's like, look, if I could do it again, if I was here now, I would wake up every morning and I would fight those bastards from the start, fight the Empire. And the brawl that ensues is actually an insane moment. But what's even crazier for me is I went back and watched this episode earlier today, a good refresher. I'm like, it's like this again, like the Kino Lloyd moment, the final episode of Arc 2. But the moment in this particular episode, and I'll try to end it at this because we know at the very end here, Luthen ends up escaping with Cassian. And Cassian leaves it all behind at that moment to go and take on the galaxy, right? And we're left on a cliffhanger. But one of my favorite moments in the brawl towards the end there is the look on Luthen's face when he realizes that the whole time, right, he's been trying to figure out ways to kill Cassian because he's like, we cannot deal with this loose end. And he has found himself on Ferrix, and in front of his eyes, he has seen the rebellion that he dreamt of in little pockets of the galaxy finally come to fruition, in a way that he did not directly plan, and that he, in the moment, wasn't even probably thinking he had a huge impact on, right? Luthen is, for many of these reasons, one of the most important characters in the story of Star Wars. And I do like that he kind of has a moment to realize that maybe even some of the stuff he's been approaching with, he's got a different way of looking at it, different way of approaching maybe what he might see as a turning point in the war. At this point, a quiet war, right? It's kind of a soft war that there's not enough unified forces yet to completely battle the Empire. But this is one of those moments that gets us going. And wow, I mean, it just ends. It ends on a cliffhanger. We don't know what happens to Dedra. We don't know what happens to Cyril. We know Luthen and Andor together, and R.I.P. Marva. It's so much good stuff that to have waited 2.5 years to now to even get the incredible season of TV we ended up getting these past few weeks felt like an eternity, Chris. So I just want to see if you have any more thoughts on season 1. Obviously, we talked, it was always going to be impossible to try to sneak this in 20 minutes, but a spectacular season of TV that I did not think they had the ability to match. They end up matching it, but season 1 is always going to be really special to me.
Yeah, I just want to add on to your Dedra Cyril Luthen Andor thing. So Dedra and Cyril, the last scene that they have together is that, again, Dedra has already told Cyril, like, you should stay away from me. But when she's getting like basically like mugged on the street because she went into the crowd and she's getting kicked down and beat up because of the uniform she's wearing, Cyril basically comes in and picks her up and saves her life. And then she was gonna like kill him, and like she aimed her gun at him and basically like, what are you doing here? And she's like just like so shocked that like he saved her life. And that's just kind of where you leave them. It's just like, what just happened there? Like, and she's like so obviously like freaked out and like afraid for so many reasons. But that's sort of how you end there. But then obviously Andor is the one that tracks down Luthen's ship, because he's come to the realization that he's going to basically leave Luthen with the choice. Like, you kill me right now, or you take me in. I'm gonna, basically, yeah, like, we're gonna either start a relationship or we're gonna end it right here. And he gives him that choice. Obviously, we know what that is, but that's sort of the lead in to season 2.
I remember that ending, feeling so gutted that we have to wait so long for the next season. The beauty of podcasting is that we are now done reviewing a season that came out 2.5 years ago, and really happy, really excited to jump in to a conversation about season 2 of Andor following this short break. And we're back to talk about Andor season 2. Full spoilers again, especially given the fact that this just came out. If you haven't had a chance to watch the episodes yet, highly encourage you to come back and listen at another time. I won't blame you. Andor season 2, one of the spectacular seasons of television we've gotten in recent memory. We open 1 year later with the Ferrix crew on Mon Mothma. Cassian Andor himself, he's out doing something else for Luthen, perceivably. At least that's as much as I could have guessed from watching the first 5 minutes of episode 1 of season 2. But Chris, before I throw it over to you to give us a little background on what's going on as we enter season 2, there's something really interesting that Tony Gilroy and Disney, I guess, decided to roll with, and how they release these episodes in a different format to how season 1 came out. Just wondering if you could tell the listeners a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's 3 episodes for a year. So it starts, 4 years before the Battle of Yavin? And for each successive year, there's 3 episodes. So it's like 3 episodes, and then you skip a year, and it's another 3 episodes, skip a year, another 3 episodes, and so on, which is very interesting. I feel like that's kind of a semi-controversial release schedule, because it feels like a situation where you could have extended the arcs into seasons. You could stretch them out and probably do even like double the episodes for each arc, because there's a lot of stuff that you skip in between some of the arcs, because it's like, from 3 BBY to 2 BBY, the rebels start building the rebel base, and you never see like how that really happens. It's just kind of like, okay, we skip forward a year, and all of a sudden all these people are on Yavin. So I think there's definitely some limitations, I thought, to sort of how they decided to do the arcs. But I think in general, it was a cool idea, because you can cover a lot of ground and you don't feel like super, like you have to, the pacing is set. You can focus on the most like impactful few days from each year that drive the story forward, and like the progression of the rebellion or the empire forward in the biggest way. You just like a little example, we'll definitely get into it, but the empire's discussion about mining Gorman, because Gorman is a big, it basically takes up 3 arcs worth of stuff. And so the first arc is like, the Empire's decision to mine Gorman. The second arc is basically them setting up Gorman. And then the third arc is the Gorman massacre. So it kind of gives you this way to sort of illustrate, especially for a big event like that, to sort of see the stages of the planning and the execution of an event like that, which I thought was really interesting, and something you don't see from Star Wars normally. Like the Rise of Skywalker is a polar opposite. They just go from thing to thing. It's like right away, like quick fire, like all of a sudden you're on this planet, things are happening. So it's very antithetical to what Star Wars normally does, or just even what TV shows normally do. So that was an interesting structure. It made it feel more real because it's just like the day-to-day stuff a lot of times.
Well, and the beauty of it too is that from everyone from Tony Gilroy to backroom producers on the staff and people who put this entire season of television together, there were reports that many of them just kind of approached this, and the goal of releasing them in the schedule was basically to make a movie for each arc and to have it get slightly more cinematic every single arc as we approach to eventually what's kind of unofficially the movie of this show, Rogue One. If you watch the final or you watch all 2 seasons pretty much in direct, all 24 hours of goodness, 24 episodes of Andor that are out there, you could just go right into Rogue One and almost not skip a beat. Like the way that the production quality almost seems like it was already incredible in season 1, like we talked about, but it takes another jump to where we see them in season 2. I mean, even on Mino Rao, where we start off and we see all of the Ferrix crew, the original crew, and it's Bix, it's Brasso, it's the whole team that made it off of Ferrix, now living off the grid to really run from the Empire. They literally grew like real rye to create the feel that Mino Rao gives you. I forget the specific place in the world where they were filming for this, but they went out and they created everything almost that didn't have to be green screened. And they put a lot of importance into making this as real as possible because, like you said at the beginning of the pod, we have no lightsabers, very little use of the Force, and we'll get to that. It's I think in both of our opinions a smart way of using it. Traditionally, those storytelling mechanisms are what carry Star Wars, and they were not needed. And honestly, like if I were to give you a hindsight, like if I was looking back on this, I would never have wanted, even if it ended up being in here, I would have never have wanted lightsabers to touch something like this. It's a special TV show that, again, like we've talked about, is a character driven show that, if you add in any kind of weird third party kind of MacGuffins that we're used to in these stories, would almost completely ruin what Tony Gilroy was trying to do, which is obviously why he never ended up doing it. Um, let's start talking about Cassian in this entire season. And I think we can get started about something I really liked. He is on probably an Imperial Star Cruiser trying to steal a TIE fighter, and that's why he's out there for Luthen. He's got to drop it off to someone. But the little character moments, again, I really enjoy how he's basically coaching up in real time as the rebellion, someone who works for the Empire, who's just definitely a person who's like, I just ended up working for the Empire, and they're trying to help out in their little way to help Cassian successfully get the TIE fighter. And it's these little battles that are being fought, like, it's referenced to Nemec's manifesto and Marva's speech to Ferrix in season 1. It's these little acts of rebellion that add up over time in an uncontrolled way, where the Empire and all the Empire ever stands for is control and basically the ability to shut down anything they want. And if they don't have that ability, they are powerless. So in a moment like this, where Cassian has a little bit more swag than season 1, he has a little bit more knowledge on how to successfully act in a way that maybe Luthen would have trained him to do over that last year or whatever amount of time have passed until the beginning of this arc. Now we're out 4 BBY. It's incredible. And I just really like that story moment to kind of catapult us into how season 2 begins, because we never hear from that girl again, and we just have to assume that she did her part. She was either caught by the Empire or she was going to continue helping the rebellion in whatever way she could.
Yeah, what I like about that scene is that, again, like you're sort of alluding to, it illustrates the different ways that Cassian and Luthen operate in terms of like activating an asset, because she's obviously very scared. She even says like, I have fun here. It's that little line where it's like she doesn't believe in what the Empire is doing, but her coworkers, she's not like she's not super opposed to them or anything. Like I feel they're just doing their jobs. They're not like cruel or anything like that. I feel like there's just a lot of people that work for a lot of companies. Like they're not cruel. It's just like the umbrella they work under just happens to have sort of its own motivations for the work people do. So I thought that was sort of an interesting way to sort of humanize that character even more than just being like, oh yeah, I'm rebelling against the Empire sort of thing. It's like, oh no, there's more personal stakes to this. But also too, from Cassian's side, it's that he's very like reassuring to her. It's like, like, I know this feels very uncomfortable for you. He's trying to make it as comfortable, like reassuring for her as possible. That's not something that Luthen would do, because he's very like shrewd and very just like to the point and very kind of a rude guy. But Cassian is trying to be like it's okay, like you're doing the right thing. It feels scary, but you're doing the right thing. And so I thought that was a cool way to sort of illustrate Cassian's like growth as a person too. Just being like he's very well trained in it, and also he has a very like cool demeanor about him, which is interesting. But then when you go to when he steals the TIE fighter, he was not trained to fly the TIE fighter, so he has no idea what he's doing. He takes off with it and he thinks he's just going to drop it right off. And one, he doesn't, again, he barely knows how to fly it because it's an experimental TIE fighter as well. It's a TIE Avenger, I believe. And it's not anything that we see in the movies. It's really not named as such. But then he lands the craft on a nondescript planet at this point, and the person that's there that's supposed to pick it up is not there. And it sounds like that, you know, that dude gets like dealt with in some way by this random group of insurgents or rebels that he comes into, and they're just having a little bit of a scuffle. And again, it's another sort of point where the alliance is not unified. And that's one of the arcs, kind of the, again, diverging paths, mirror paths of the show, is that the Empire feels very organized in the first season, and it sort of starts to devolve and get more disorganized as people have different motivations for things. But the rebels start out very disorganized, and they sort of try to figure out how to unify and become an alliance. And a lot of that growth we don't really see like directly, like beat by beat. But by the end of the show, you sort of see how everything comes together. And it's like, oh yeah, they're an alliance, and they can sort of, they have enough might to go against the Empire by the end. But for now, that's not happening.
Yeah, what a great point too, because I wasn't even really thinking about parallels of the Ascent. Well, I'll probably start by saying this. Like you said, both the Empire and the Rebels at this point in the story of Andor, which obviously is like the middle, it's the middle, right? Start of the second half of this grand story, are both in complete disarray. And, you know, there's no organized central point, right? Like, again, Yavin doesn't come into full effect really until the second to last arc of the series. And it's in complete alignment with how it eventually happened. But you see on the planet that Cassian ends up getting taken on, and you see a split in this rebel faction, or at least, like you said, are the insurgents? Like, what are their goals? Like, what even is this group of people? It was the first time in the show that I had a feeling similar to seeing the entire crew on Aldhani eat the dust, because you're like, who's gonna live and who's gonna die? Like, you have favorite characters, you know who's gonna make it to Rogue One at the very least, but there's a lot of this filler where you're like, this is how the rebellion was fought. This is parallel, right? How the Empire started so strong in season one and eventually plummeted to where, you know, you're at with Partgaz, where he's at the very end of the final series, and where Ben Mendelsohn's, you know, creepy ass is in there interrogating Dedra at the end of this. I say Dedra again, Dedra at the very end of the show. They end up where the rebellion had to kind of begin, right? So if you're talking about the rebellion's ascent and how messy that was, and eventually it ended up in a more organized place that led to victory, the Empire having a parallel complete drop off from their peak is spectacular, because the way that it's sold at that weird little retreat on whatever planet that they're on, and Krennic is basically having the Met Gala or we eventually get a Met Gala, but they are having a conference type weekend retreat with all of these fascist, far right, you know, Nazi figures in the Imperial, higher Imperial ranks, figuring out how we're going to build this Death Star. What is the next step? Oh, we're going to Gorman. Like you've already mentioned the Gorman people and where we end up on that planet, right? And eventually the one of the worst moments that's ever been captured on film in the Star Wars universe.
Yeah, that's basically that first meeting with Krennic and Dedra and everyone. That's basically a Nazi Marriott hotel conference meeting, which I thought was so fun because they're getting hors d'oeuvres, like they're eating stuff, which I thought was so interesting. They're like, yeah, so when are we gonna start mining the planet? When are we gonna start building the armory? As they're like eating like a like a crumpet or something like that. I just thought that was a very like humanizing thing. Like it makes the world feel very like more like ours. Just like these people eat food and talk about real effed up stuff. It's just one of those things where you never see moments like that in the show. But I think that meeting in general is something that is so interesting to me because there's lots of references in both seasons to the Emperor. And obviously the Emperor, we've seen him a lot in the original, the prequels, and then the ones in the original trilogy. And you see him as like the master of, he's like a Sith Lord, he's very concerned about getting a new apprentice and teaching him and wearing a hood. and, deceiving the Jedi and all this stuff and being the Chancellor and then, using Force lightning on people. But I feel like the Emperor indirectly is a more interesting character in this show because you hear about all this correspondence these people have with the Emperor, and they talk about policy and they talk about strategy. Parallel to real life, he calls the Death Stars, mining this planet for the Death Star as an energy program. It's like, you sort of couch these nefarious tasks in very like palatable words so that you can sell it to the public as like, oh yeah, we're trying to like give infinite energy, but people don't know that it's for a weapon that can destroy their planets at will. And it feels like a very realistic like misdirection a regime like the Empire would make. He's not just force lightning people everywhere all over the place. He's doing like the day-to-day work of tightening his grip on power in a way that we can visualize more realistically in the real world, as opposed to like, use the force.
That's the beauty of Andor too, right? Is if you, God, yeah, the Emperor being this unseeable figure in Andor as a whole, obviously, like you said, never makes an appearance. Um, he is far more antagonizing as a evil Sith Lord figure, like truly the number one most powerful being at that point in the universe. And he also couldn't have done this without help, and to have them have to still have these corporate type meetings because they are just the Empire at the end of the day is just one of the one of the most evil corporations to ever exist. And it's just like we do it under the guise of peace and security for the galaxy, and even like we with bringing up the energy program, like it's sold to the senators as well. Mon Mothma, Bail Organa, folks that from the original trilogy and the prequels and all of the associated canon that we've gotten as Star Wars fans over the years, know this as only the energy program up until the moment in A New Hope where you learn exactly what the Death Star is capable of, right?
Well, late in Andor, Cassian starts to put together with Luthen's intel that the energy program is AKA the Death Star. And Bail Organa has that line where it's like, we've been funding the energy program for years. We've known about it for this entire time. But again, that just tells you how big the lie is like, oh yeah, they hid it from all these senators. Even though they were trying to like scuff out the Empire and try to figure out their motivations, they hid the Death Star so well that the Gorman thing was very like, oh, we didn't realize that was a front for this. And that's so interesting. Again, last thing I'll say before I throw it back to you is that, again, like the Emperor, we see the Emperor as a Sith Lord in most of the things, and that's his most important role. But in here, he really feels like, without making an appearance, a ruler of the galaxy, as a dictator, as a tone setter for everything that happens in the Star Wars universe. He feels like he is, his directive, his word is law, and he's got all these enforcers to carry out basically his whims.
It really says a lot that even the most powerful Force user in the galaxy at that point, him and his next most powerful crony, Darth Vader, are not enough to quell not only rebellion but just regular day-to-day life that doesn't align with their direction of empirical ascent, right? Throughout the entire galaxy, like you said, you need enforcers, you need gruntmen. And what's so interesting about that room too, when it starts off, you're basically just in a room, and we would talk about this off camera right after we saw these episodes. You're in a room where Dedra is the only one that isn't a part of the big group, old and middle-aged white men. At that point, she's like the only lady, the only woman in the entire room, and she's being played from the beginning because she has to almost carry that unsaid. Like it's not something that Tony Gilroy has to write in and like throw it in your face, right? Again, another thing we talk a lot about is like we appreciate a bit of effort that the writer wants the viewer to kind of like think about the situation without saying it outright. And once you really pick up on the fact that Krennic from the beginning, when he's telling Dedra how much he really wants her to give him her truest assessment without playing this like, kind of, she's probably been playing this role her whole life. She's been playing multiple sides just to get to the point she's at, because she's had to jump over a lot more humps along the way to reach to basically be the person that's like, I got a seat in the room. And like, this is all my life has led to, and this is all I've wanted out of this career is a seat in this room. And I'm finally being given a smidget of power from the most powerful person in that room, when Director Krennic is like, I need your assessment on what's going to happen on Gorman. And she uses the intel that she worked and almost died for on Ferrix to not only, as we later learn, capture her own support for her off the books kind of like her looking for access, her looking for all the members that of the rebellion up to this point that we've talked about, especially Luthen. It's very sleazy, and I don't know. I really appreciate a scene like that where you as the viewer have to kind of like look between the lines and be like, Dedra is getting played immediately from the get go of this season, and really what she's talking about is stuff that she may believe in, that she thinks she is the one leading. I think the actor Denise Goff said at one point, one of these declassified episodes that had come out on YouTube, that Dedra's how dangerous would it be when a minnow, someone like a minion type character thinks that they are in control of everything, and they spend their whole life thinking that they're in control of everything. Again, it's just like the perfect comp to her toxic ass boyfriend Cyril Karn, as we eventually find out they're together after him saving her in season 1. She's nothing at the end of this, but she also gives everything again. But it's not like in the same way that Luthen's like, like I basically I fight for this world, like I burn my life to make a sunrise I know I'll never see type shit, right? Like he is actually doing it for other people. But Dedra doesn't understand that while she thinks she's doing it for herself and she's got the right people along the lines, she's just not taking it anywhere. They're using her from day one.
Well, for one, she doesn't want to be there. She wants to pursue Axis. That's what she wants to pursue. Luthen. That's really what she and Cyril, ironically, they have sort of the same goal, is to pursue like these rebel insurgents and like agitators. That's kind of what they want to do. That's kind of what she dedicates all of her time for. And so like this sort of the Gorman thing, when she's put on that assignment, she's like, Partagaz and them talk and just like, like play it off as a demotion, but you're going to be managing this thing, but she's like, I don't want to do that. I want to pursue Axis. Like, well, you got no choice. Like you were in the room, you got to do it. So yeah, it's kind of like she really has no say over sort of what she's doing.
Consider it basically a gift, right? He's like, consider Gorman a gift. And it's such an interesting way to, again, him trying to get Dedra off the scent, trying to be almost like, look, I'm actually the only one here looking out for you. If you don't take this as the layup that it is, and you continue this shady stuff behind Krennic, behind my back, and it's gonna end up like no one here is gonna protect you. Like the nicest thing someone did for Dedra was basically say like, just go with the flow, and you can live a nice, beautiful life on Coruscant. As it's referenced many times in Rogue One, return to the Empire and then become a hero of the Empire, where many people, may look at it as like, no, I'm going to go and I'm going to, like Galen Erso says to Krennic at the beginning of Rogue One, is like, why would I want to rejoin this terror machine, creating this? He's like, no, you'll return as heroes. And that's how Dedra probably would look at it. But like you said, like she's so obsessed with Axis. So when you got this kind of disarray going on at the same time, to go back to Cassian, he's just seen basically how he experienced maybe a little bit microcosm of Aldhani, his early days in the rebellion before he became radicalized and a full member of Luthen's crew. I was not super hot on the first 3 episodes and how they portrayed Cassian, I think, until a few days afterwards, Chris, because of the way that other folks maybe were talking about it, changed the way that I thought about the time we spent on that backwater planet that ended up meaning nothing, on paper for where we ended up going in the season. But it really just shows you how much Cassian's grown, how cool and collected he's in these situations now, how he's able to play another group of rebels that, at the end of the day, maybe would have been aligned with them in another life. But at this current space, they're just warring factions that are filled with these big egos and big heads and people who are not thinking about the bigger picture. And like, I don't blame anyone. Look, they had these massive monsters coming out and eating them too. Like they had to deal with an unknown ship no one knew how to control. They had to deal with uncharted territory, basically uncertainty to if this guy's Cassian in this case is even a member of the Empire or not. No one there knew Luthen. Like he has friends everywhere, but these are not his friends.
No, it's a microcosm of the problems of the Alliance. Like these two, even if these two groups can't get along and figure out how to make the fighter work, and like, obviously they have like squabbles even before Cassian, shows up, if he's able to pit them against each other, it's like, man, this is really easy. Like I got away pretty quick. I mean, like once he basically like gets these two factions to sort of go after each other, when they sort of start agitating each other, it's pretty easy to steal the fighter and get away. And of course, you see Yavin. But I feel like, again, this is sort of like a hard tangent. But again, we sort of alluded to talking about Mon Mothma. I think this is kind of where we should talk about Mon Mothma, because her arc is basically like she knows something is wrong. She's one of those senators that, she realizes that we need to like resist the Empire in some way. Like the things they're doing are bad, but at the same time, I have to keep up appearances. And that's kind of what all like the people like, even like Aldon, like Luthen does that too. He's got the whole gallery, his antique gallery, all this like fine art. These people are on Coruscant, basically the heart of the Empire. And Mon Mothma and Luthen have to put on like these faces. Like Mon Mothma's from like a rich Chandrillin, very like upper class family, and they have these certain like customs, like this arranged marriage type stuff. Like she's trying to basically put together like money and funding and charitable stuff. She makes a charitable foundation, basically all in the name of trying to finance like rebel activities and things like that. And she tries to like enter, people want to enter like deals with her and like all this other stuff. But again, it's like the big deal with Tay Coleman crew. I forgot exactly what the other guy with the parents' name is, but then basically it's like, okay, like I'll help you, but your daughter needs to marry my son. And it's like it follows the Chandrillin tradition of arranged marriages. There's all like this like antiquated ideals about, what you need to, what your life needs to be in Chandrillin society and all this other stuff. And like what your role is as a senator in the Imperial Senate. She's realizing that the Senate is just like a very empty body of people. And like her whole life, everything around her is very shallow and empty. And she feels like she has to like do something about it. And that's the thing, is like, it's just a big character evolution for Mon Mothma, because in her 2 appearances in the movies, she's basically just like, I'm here. Intel, this is what we're doing. We need to get information for Death Star. Both Return of the Jedi and Rogue One. It's like information for Death Star and Death Star 2. That's like her whole role. But here it's like, okay, like you see like she's like an instrumental figure in this entire thing, and like how she eventually gets to the point that we see her in Rogue One.
Literally everyone in her life is beyond shallow. I mean, the only person that she could really rely on was someone who you could probably read between the lines and kind of assume that Mon and Tay Colma were, maybe something more to each other before, or maybe even during her arranged marriage to her husband, Perrin, right? And Perrin from the beginning is obviously a figure too that doesn't seem like he particularly is fond of his wife, fond of the senator that he was set up to marry for familial gain, probably. And as you insinuated earlier, we get a little scene between Mon and her daughter, one of my least favorite characters in the entire show. But I think that's just how powerful this writing is. She is written to really just be like basically what Mon could have been if she didn't have a functioning brain. Mon could have easily ended up in the situation where her daughter is currently. And what's crazy is that Mon recognized the moment where her daughter is not happy with the situation that she's been put in. At least it seems like that. Except when Mon opens up to her and basically is like, I'm going to do what my mom never told me. I'm going to tell you, you can run from this if you want. This is not for you. You don't want this. And just like the little like empire loving scoundrel that her daughter is, her daughter locks in and basically tells her mom to get it together, which is crazy, by the way. So little scenes like that, like she has no one. And again, Tay Colma, eventually we find out, R.I.P. my boy, but he had to get taken out because even he had a limit to how much he cared about Mon. So like, what does Mon even have in Chandrilla, in the Senate anymore, other than a couple of her buddies that ended up joining her, like Bail?
I'm glad you brought up that scene where she basically tries to give her daughter permission to run away. Because I feel like, again, it's kind of the layers of the writing to the show. Like, that's how I interpret it, is like she's trying to give herself permission to run away from all of, like her life and her responsibilities, being like, I've been thinking about it for a long time, and this feels like a scenario where I can sort of project onto her what I really want to do for myself, which is interesting, because then obviously the marriage goes through, and then you got that big dancing scene where like Chandrillin party music, and it's just her just like dancing because she's just like, you know what, I need to like stress release. It felt very relatable, just being like, you know what, I just gotta let loose, man. Okay.
Let me get like 17 shots of the best dark alcohol you got, and we're going craziest boiler room set. I've got Kate Tronada out here. We brought him all the way from Earth, bro. Like, y'all want to be here for this moment. It's kind of fun reading a little bit back into what they were talking about, those declassified episodes. Kind of the way they talked about the music of Chandrila was obviously very regal. Like, we get a lot of scenes in the pre-wedding celebrations prior to even that little moment that she has with her daughter, where it is more, regal. It is more put together and a bit, I don't know, like Chandrilan culture, obviously, like you already said, very rich, not only in culture, but very rich in like stature and probably stance in the galaxy, right? And power. Like her seat as a senator, no matter how much the Senate and democracy at that point was just a complete lie and just a guise for pure power from Emperor Palpatine himself, like I am the Senate. Still, like she had a lot of pull and people really liked her, and that had to not only come from her ability as Mon Mothma to be a really good senator, but like the Senate seat of Chandrila means something. Um, for it to just switch up immediately and become that kind of crazy DJ set where she's just completely lost it, and like I'm with her, I completely support her. Sometimes you just got to take 10 shots to the dome and just let loose on the dance floor. And that scene is crazy. And I love it because I never thought that they would write a scene like that in a show like this. And I still, again, like it's something where I'm like looking at it kind of removed a few weeks later. I'm like, God, that shit's brilliant. Like it's so wacky. And you need a little bit of something like that because this show's really serious. And even in a moment like this where you know the implications of what's about to happen. I mean, shoot, we see Cinta for the first time since Aldani, who's going to come into factor here in the next arc. But when Cinta is given the kill on sight order, or at least like away from the party by Luthen, like that's even a crazy scene where Luthen's like, what a privilege it must be to not know what's about to happen. Like when she's like, I don't understand what you mean, and he's just like, oh, what a life you must have to not think the way I think about these things. Which even brings up that Luthen even have to do that, like send out the take home kill order, right? Like that's just the way he operates, and it's been working for him so far. But man, Mon was just having the worst day of her life, man. Like, God, I love her performance as Mon. I love Genevieve O'Reilly's performance as Mon, and it's just so iconic already. And again, like you said, like if you look back at even her appearances of old Mon Mothma in the original trilogy, or what we've gotten throughout the years, like it's all given more importance because you know what she had to go through to get to that moment. I didn't even think how do you even write that? And they found a way to do it.
Yeah, it's the one legacy character that they actually have in the show, and it means something because nothing had been done with her. And so yeah, I think that's kind of the last place I want to leave it off at. Is just, yeah, like they actually, for the lack of legacy characters and the lack of references to other movies that they show, Mon Mothma is the one that like let's make her something. Let's make her a character. And it's so cool that Genevieve O'Reilly actually got to like sink her teeth into that character and like make it her own. Because that was really that character is kind of a blank canvas. And the only thing you need to know is that she denounces Emperor Palpatine in front of everyone in the Senate, and then she's like one of the big rebel council leaders. That's the only two things you need to have happen. But then it's sort of like, again, you can work backwards because you know the end. Like you said like Tony Gilroy, it's like, you know the end. And it's like, okay, how would a person like that in her position come to the conclusion that she needs to like speak out in that way, even though like all this tension has been boiling under the surface? And I don't know if you want to add anything else before I move on to what exactly gets her over the edge, but sort of moving on to Gorman and that whole arc. But looks like you got something for me.
I do have something for you, Chris, and it's just really something I got to throw in quick. I made a note, like I talked about throughout the episode so far. I've got a few quotes, and it's really one of my favorite quotes from the entire season at the very beginning. And I think it's like a 3-minute, they don't cut away, single shot. I really enjoy the way that the directors decided to kind of all use this ability of the camera following someone from behind. Like you are following the story. You are you are not in control of a roller coaster that you have willingly put on the screen. And every time that you get a shot of someone from behind and that camera is following them, I mean, you get the intensity of it from that first scene on Chandrila when they're prepping for this big party. And in that spot, in that uncut 3 minutes where they're moving around, Mon Mothma is the center of attention. She meets up with Vel. You get a bit of Luthen. and Luthen and Mon meet up, Mon's just like, oh, he's terrible at keeping secrets. And Luthen's like, oh, I've been practicing. And she'll say, we'll see about that. And it's perfect type of writing to me. It's like a lot of the things where it's like, that they're like kind of talking to each other a little cheekily. No one's ever going to pick up on it. But I just really enjoy little things like that. And what's happening at the same time, Chris, as the DJ said, in Mon Mothma's very epic crash out, is Brasso. Rest in peace, my boy. We also get some of the first sexual assault in Star Wars. Like the final 20 minutes of Harvest, the third episode of the season, super intense. And having it being super, like you're jumping from the regal celebrations and descent of Mon Mothma on Chandrila with, you would think Cassian got out of that planet, that'd be the worst thing that he'd have to deal with. But his arrival to Mina Rao, where he meets up with his crew from Ferrix, to have it all go downhill as much as it did, like the end of episode 3, even apart from everything we've talked about with Mon, I think really sad and really depressing, but also kind of, I think, plays to the strengths of how they release these episodes, right? If this is the end of movie 1 of this season, you just basically have to live with the fact that we lost one of the main characters and one of the most important people in Cassian's life. And then we're just going to miss out on an entire year of what was in between that moment and where we pick up into the next arc. And how do you end up leaving a place like Mina Rao where Willman's lying to his girlfriend? By the way, that dude's got way too many girlfriends, but yeah, the galaxy is wide and large. But he
takes advantage of his opportunities when he gets them,
he gets them
in the
every
midst
time.
of all of his chaos, he just gets it. He just gets some, man.
He's like, oh, that dude, oh, look, he's got his shirt up. That's crazy. That's crazy. In the middle of a massacre, that's crazy. But Willman, Bix has just gone through it again. Season 1, it's her torture. Season 2, it's dealing with this ridiculously scary member of the Imperial Army, right? Cassian comes home thinking that he's already gone through the worst of it, and you think he saved the day, but one of the stormtroopers, like we talked about at the beginning, like the accuracy of a stormtrooper, like they have their bullets hit 3 times harder in a show like this. Because you just look down the way that Brasso was trying to escape, and a really sick like motorcycle sequence. I think this whole part of the season has some of the best aerial shots, some of the best rig shots for the side of for a vehicle out of anything I've seen in Star Wars. It's beautiful. It looks incredible, and to have, I don't know, a moment like that where I'm like, oh, they're gonna make it out. Brasso's gonna make it out, and he doesn't, and they decide to leave immediately. They leave B2 behind. And I didn't know where they were going to go the next arc, right? And again, that's just the power of this jump, like BBY4 at BBY3. I don't know. R.I.P. Brasso. That's my guy.
Yeah, last thing I'll say about Brasso's death is that, again, yeah, the stormtrooper kills him, and then when Andor shows up, he's already dead. There's no scene where it's like, again, I think about the Qui-Gon Obi-Wan episode 1 scene where he gets stabbed, and then he's laying there on the ground for like 10 minutes, and then he's got enough stamina to wait for Obi-Wan to slice Darth Maul in half. And then he goes over there and he goes, more plot. It's like, Anakin's the chosen one. You must teach him, bring balance. They don't talk about like their relationship together or anything like that, or just like plot. And then he dies. But then in this show, there is none of that. There's literally no interaction, because that's normally how it happens. That's how most people, like their last moments with someone, you never know the last thing you're going to say to someone in real life. You never know what's going to happen tomorrow. And that's sort of, I like that scene because it's very indicative of like, this guy he's known his whole life. Like, and he's already dead. And it's like, Cassian's like, he recognizes the urgency of the situation. And like, just the fact that, he is dead. Like, we can't do anything for him. We have to leave him here and we got to go. We just have to keep moving. But kind of in that spirit of keeping moving, as you sort of, again, we skip a year. Bix and Cassian are now back on Coruscant, per like Luthen's request. And Bix is obviously very stressed about, she's still traumatized by the torture device, and she gets a lot of PTSD about that experience with the brain device that the one guy uses, the one creepy looking guy uses. And it's kind of like you have in the notes here sort of a love arc, because it is sort of that, it's the one arc, the one sort of time in the show where you sort of get to see their relationship. And you can tell they spend, the day to day, they spend a lot of time together. like these episodes happen a lot and they talk about it. And it's just so interesting because it's like, again, it's like it feels like a very real thing. It's like you're just kind of like trapped in your mind, like in your apartment. You can't do anything. You feel like you're kind of useless. And Cassian is trying like his best to sort of help her out, but he can't quite seem to do it. And gets to a certain point where they got to figure something out, and then kind of skipping forward to the end of that little arc. She gets that they figure out that the torture dude, is on Coruscant with his device, and Cassian helps Bix kill him, and then blows up the whole floor and the device. And it's so interesting because again, it sort of grows Cassian's character as well. It's be like, like, I'll help you out with this. Obviously they've known each other for a long time, and he recognized that was the one thing that she needed to move on. It's like, we need to get rid of this guy. We need to make sure that he can't do this to anyone like ever again. So we're just gonna blow him up. We're gonna kill him. We're gonna blow up.
With or without any kind of permission or direction from Luthen, right? Like, I think it's kind of insinuated that it might have been a Luthen directive because prior to I think his name is Dr. Gorst, right? Before she gets the chance to take him out in honestly, one of the best ways possible, given how he was portrayed as a villain in season 1. You get a little bit of that light in the flashing distance. Like, even in their corner, they're very desolate, concrete type. I don't know, like, I hated the way that apartment looked. Like, of course, that's like the one apartment that they would be able to have as like a safe zone there if it was even Clay and Luthen maybe lived there at one point before getting to where they ended up at, one of these like glorious storefronts where they had the richest of the rich of Coruscant visiting them. This apartment they're in is desolate. It's dark. They have to stay hidden, but even then, they always have the eye of Luthen kind of over them. Like, if he's looking out in the distance, and Bix is rightfully so going through some really depressive, real deep mental stuff that she deals with, at a combination of like substance abuse. I don't know if she ever drank, but obviously she's taking these like drops that are probably getting her high just to deal with the sadness that she's carrying from everything she's gone through. Again, like, it's only been a year since she was attacked by that soldier, and 2 years from Dr. Gorst torturing her. She's just looking out in the distance and still sees that Cassian is needed by Luthen. And Cassian's at a point, right, in this love story almost with Bix, and that's why I put that in the notes, because I think the strongest bond that they have developed, and the time that has me really believe they're at where they're at when they get to Yavin together, like, it happens in these 3 episodes. I even like the little character moments when Cassian and Bix are going out and they got to buy some food, obviously, but they can't be seen. They're not really worried about anyone tackling them in the streets. They go to this beautiful little shack that I'm going to say, as a side note, the shack that they go to in that first episode of the second arc, completely, like, there was one person's job at Lucasfilm apparently to collect a ton of different types of foods, perishables, like basically everything that they used to stock that one mini mart. They collected over the course of like the 2 years in between the shows. So I just, again, like, a little note of how much detail went into these scenes. Bix tells the person his name. Like, the storekeeper knows Bix by name, and Bix introduced Cassian as her husband. So it's something Cassian's not comfortable with. He's still really iffy about them being on Coruscant to begin with, and like being so open out in the open, where Bix is like, I'm sick of it. Like, I want to go to the freaking park, man. Like, I want to go out in daylight. Like, I want to feel the ray of the sun on my body. Like, I'm sick of the way we're living, right? So for all of the attempts they're making at having a relationship with each other through the time of rebellion, whether they knew it or not at this point even, just comes to a head. And I think Bix softens Cassian in a really important way, as I think Cassian gets Bix hardened up in a really important way as well. Like you're saying, like, he acknowledges that she needs to take out Gorst to move on. She still carries so much of this pain. Like, I'll even throw it over to you, especially to talk about this scene with Luthen that happens halfway through the arc with Bix, where Luthen went behind Cassian's back while Cassian's doing a job, right, to go out to Gorman, get to the Gormans. But when he's out on speaking to the Gormans about stuff that Luthen is trying to set up, Luthen goes behind his back to try to talk to Bix. But even in that moment, Luthen can see that Bix is just not doing well. Like, he has to still do what rebellion is meant for. He's rebelling to be able to be human and have human emotions, like be empathetic to what Bix is going through. But it is still pretty crazy that in the middle of all of this, Luthen still is like, look, Bix, we need you. Like, we need Cassian. And it was just a lot for her to take in the moment. It's just kind of crazy how that whole arc ends with them blowing up that entire floor and killing Gorst, given where it all began and how reluctant Bix was to be the hero that she wanted Cassian to be, right?
Well, it's interesting. I just want to talk about that whole them finding Gorst in the first place. Is I want to talk about the spy character. I want to talk about Young or Jung. I forgot exactly how he pronounced it. I mean, he's definitely like one of the most important characters in the entire show, and
Shout
he
out
is sort of
Lonnie.
he is the recipient of the "I burned my life for a sunrise I know I'll never see" speech from Luthen, which again I'll just allude to it there. It's great. I don't think we really need to talk about that much. You've definitely seen the clip, but he's just such an interesting character because again he's in the belly of the beast for the entire show, and it's only in that one episode where he meets with Luthen you realize he was a spy the entire time. You just figure it's okay, like why are we here? We're just seeing like the ISB doing their thing, and then you realize he's just been filtering information to him for a really long time. And in this particular situation with Bix and Gorst, it's mentioned in the ISB council meetings. Partagas basically tells Jung like, oh, we're going to expand Gorst's torture program. We're going to like basically set up a base for him on Coruscant, and we're going to expand his program. We're going to give him more resources, do this other stuff. And it's never mentioned, it's never explicitly shown in the show that Young told Luthen about this. But you can definitely heavily imply because there's a scene earlier where Luthen is like, we're going to be meeting more often because I need more info. And those two scenes together and sort of the way that's all executed, and then like she knows exactly where to find him. It all just kind of, there's that nice line where it's like, okay, Young gets the information, Luthen passes it off. It's like, I know what you need to move on, and I just happen to have the information. I have the spies. I got the network to snuff out this guy.
It's such a good point too, with Lonnie really being a hero. Like Lonnie from that, even that one scene you're referencing there, Luthen's basically telling him, he's like, look, Lonnie, we're living in a time, we need heroes. We need people like you. We need people who put themselves out on the line. Like people I value. Like he doesn't, like Lonnie comes across almost in that first interaction with him, right, where he's getting chastised. Everything, he's getting absolutely destroyed. You'd have to think that over 2 years of sitting with that and kind of what he knows that he's fighting for, again, like just probably someone who joined the Empire and just like, wow, I don't want to be a fascist. I don't like what's happening right now. Someone who values the future life that not only himself, but he prioritizes every time he meets with, or almost every single time he meets with Luthen, the lives of his wife and his daughter, right? And the futures that he wants them to live in. Lonnie might be up there in the upper echelons of most heroic characters in this saga, because without Lonnie, you don't find out about the Death Star. Without Lonnie, you don't find out about the folks that are trying to infiltrate Mon Mothma's escape. Without Lonnie, you don't get all of these things happening. And it's both the genius of how Luthen operates in the galaxy, superimposed with the heroicism of someone who may not be coming across as a hero necessarily. Like, that's the really interesting part about looking back on these two seasons. Lonnie is a hero. He's a heroic figure, but he's never played up to be that way. I do like that Lonnie is given a bit of praise in that first interaction, because the boy deserves it. You need a little bit of positive reinforcement, given he's giving everything. It's the same as Luthen. Like he is a mirror of what Luthen has given in a smaller sample size without even probably really knowing it, right?
Well, Lonnie, it's the last thing I'll say about Lonnie is it's that he gains the trust of people in the ISB and gets information and gets certain favors because he actually like sticks up for people in the council, like in the day-to-day thing. Because I know what Partagas is trying to like interrogate, like, why didn't you do this sort of thing? And everyone's afraid to speak up. And then like Young speaks up. He says the thing that they should have done. And then, the Partagas was like, hey, well, that's the right answer. Thanks for speaking up. And then like Supervisor Hirt, who ends up being like a big player in the end of the season, he's like, oh, thank you for sticking up for me, man. I was stressed out, dude. And again, it's one of those things where it's like, where like the ISB and the Empire, they're all trying to like step over each other and like create deception. He ends up getting more information from people because people trust him, because he does stick up for them, even though he does not believe. And it goes back to that sort of that rebel spy Empire defector at the beginning of the season. It's like, even though the cause, the overall cause and the goals are nefarious, I feel like he's definitely got a certain like I don't know if it's respect, but like kind of an empathy for where they all are. And it's like, I get it. Like, this is a very stressful situation. It's like, I'll stick up for you here because I know, for one, you'll appreciate it. And two, you're going to give me more info. You're going to give me more things to do. And that's more information that I can pass on.
Lonnie is actually the glue guy. Lonnie's
Yeah.
actually the glue
He
guy.
is the glue guy. Yeah.
And one more note on that, as you're talking about it, it's kind of hard for me to not look at Lonnie as kind of an example of everything the Empire is missing. Because he's really one of the only guys that's a bit friendlier to these people, like you're saying. Like, you see it in one moment. Here it's like we talked about at the very end of the season, kind of like shoves off the fact that, Dedra's like, yeah, him and Young were close. And then even in that moment where he's like probably grieving a bit, because he's like, yeah, probably that was one of the guys that I was closer with because he was nice to me and he stood up for me, even if like the people and the reasons they were getting stood up for were wrong. Like, he still on a person to person level, like, showed a bit of care that he's literally not getting from anyone. Like, Hirtz isn't getting that from Dedra. Dedra's not getting that from Hirtz. She's certainly not getting it from Young, who stole her code cert. RIP Dedra's code cert. But yeah, Young was a little sneaky, beautiful character to have. And again, just be a perfect example of someone that will return to him probably at the end of the episode here, but someone that was necessary and not just a cog in like an empirical system, but like a really important cog in like the rebellion that needed every cog that it possibly could have just to get up the hill. Like, if you're trying to track up this mountain, the Empire has got a way easier time of doing it, but you need every single person on your side that you can get. I mean, that's something that Luthen got. That's something that Luthen understood from the very beginning. And that's why you end up getting someone like Lonnie on your side.
Yeah. Lonnie's the MVP. And I think at this point we're sort of like circling around the big arc. We've gotten a lot of places where we're sort of leading up to it. I think it's time to talk about Gorman.
Oh, the Gormans.
And sort of the Gorman massacre and the whole saga there. Because obviously we talked about a little bit that, the mining of the material, it's like, how are we going to get these people off the planet? How are we going to basically get public perception on our side? They got the department, the Ministry of Enlightenment or whatever, which is literally what the Nazis called their propaganda thing, which I thought was so funny. He's just like, yeah, we're just going to use that. That sounds good. But basically, it's kind of a united front from all these people in this room being like, okay, like, propaganda will only get you so far. As Dedra says, we need an insurgency. You need a rebellion you can count on. You need to sort of motivate people to take action, but in a way that you can easily spin the public perception of it. And obviously they do it through news and things like that, and sort of selling what you're seeing in front of you and being like, no, this is what's happening. But sort of, again, that's sort of the start of the Gorman arc, is that Cyril is now, we're going back to Cyril. He's he's a good boy now. He's a good boy. He's got that job at the Bureau of Standards. He's given the speech that he got toward the second half of the first season when he's like being introduced to the job. And he's like a good little boy now for the Empire. He's not doing his corpo thing. He doesn't have a gun anymore. Dedra and Cyril are now a thing. And Dedra realizes that, Cyril and his mom got a weird relationship. And Dedra's like, hey, you got to buzz off. And so they have this whole working relationship where it's like, okay, like Dedra's doing her, she's overseeing the Gorman operation, but then Cyril has a job on Gorman, where it's like he can be sort of close enough to get in good with the Gormans and feed them accurate information, but information that the Empire is willing to give up so that the insurgency can start. So all these Gormans that are kind of stand-ins for the French, it's very, very French-looking planet, but it's a whole front for the Gormans to start a rebellion and insurgency, give them some accurate information, do some raids, and sort of gradually build up this perception that the Gormans are, they're kind of vermin that need to be sort of exterminated, or like they need to be dealt with on behalf of the Empire. Like, these people are unruly, ungrateful for imperial rule, all in the guise of basically, again, trying to mine the planet, trying to twist public perception so that they can do whatever they want to.
And the way they twist public perception in a way that would, in no other context, I mean, again, you could probably use this in a real world place. It's been used before. You take a group of people that are so unassuming, are so like they've done nothing but be a single export economy for the entirety of their existence. Like, they're known as a higher class, richer folks that are very into high fashion, and what their export is is some kind of Star Wars
It's like a
whatever
silk.
whatever
It's like a silk that like you can
the
make clothes with and
spiders.
stuff. Yeah, it's from like spiders.
And they're unassuming people that are non-offensive to other folks and are literally they just exist. So the amount of work that the Empire would have to do to even change a bit of the perception, like you get it in that same scene where Dedra and Cyril are meeting with Cyril's mom. Cyril's mom kind of talks offhandedly about like, yeah, like the Gormans are so like they just keep talking about how the Gormans are so a certain way. Like, I can't believe we even used to buy Gorman. We don't buy Gorman anymore. And this is how that empirical news, like, or whatever they ended up calling it, right? Like, they make an appearance in the eventual massacre of the Gorman people.
Imperial
But
News. Yeah, I think it's called literally just called Imperial News.
and
Yeah.
how we got from people that basically are high fashion nerds from Paris being framed as terrorists and insurgents when all of their bodies lay dead on the floor following the massacre. And I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit because I'm going to track back to basically being like, the point I'm trying to make is it's insane how the Empire went to all of that length, basically just to be like, we can't, to take a note from their Marriott Envoy Express meeting that they had in the previous arc. Like, one of the directors in the Empire is like, wouldn't it just be easy to call it a natural disaster or take them out or be like, yeah, they were just all blipped away basically because of X, Y, and Z reason. And no one would question it. But it was far more powerful to have it be like, no, like these are reasons why we're taking them out because that's the power the Empire holds. And if it's just like all these people mysteriously disappearing with no reason and not giving like a percent of decision of choice to the public, this doesn't work. So this setup arc to send not only Cassian over for Luthen to send Cassian to Gorman to get a beat on the pulse, Cyril is like finding himself in the middle of what he might think and know is right in his gut when he ends up meeting and maybe even having an affair with one of the Gormans, as it's kind of insinuated. He builds relationships with these people over time because when he finds himself on the Gorman planet, it's something his mom is like, why are you over there? Like, why are you giving it up? You eventually find out, it's just Dedra using her boyfriend, right? Like, their relationship is so icky. We should probably talk a little bit about that too. But yeah, I guess my last note on this is just it is wild to see the balance of Andor going to Gorman for the first time and understanding how underprepared they are and can just see the writing on the wall and to know that at the same time a character like Cyril is on the same planet in the same town as Cassian, this man that he's been hunting his entire life, but is still finding himself probably closer aligned to Cassian at the end of the day. He's like, just what did the Gormans do? What is the Empire actually up to? Dedra's holding back almost everything from him the entire time he's over there. So I don't know. It just finds himself in the middle of it while Cassian is also having his doubts about, are the Gormans truly prepared for the worst of the worst that's to come from an Imperial attack?
Well, yeah. Last thing I'll say about this little part is that like Cassian is he's very upfront with Luthen, being like, yeah, these people, like, the Empire lies all the time. This is like what they want to do. He sort of sees through this from the beginning. But I think the Gormans, they're just like, and Luthen, they're just so determined to take a stand because, again, the first sort of action from the Empire is to build an armory near like where the first Gorman massacre was, when Tarkin lands his shuttle on top of people, which is a Legends event that is brought into canon. That is sort of framed as the first Gorman massacre. And yeah, it's so interesting because, yeah, again, everyone's they're sort of primed. The Empire wants to prime them to sort of fight back, being like, okay, like, increased Empire presence. They're not attacking anyone yet, but they feel like something is coming and they need to stop it. And so it's like, okay, we're going to start with the shipping raid. Cyril's going to give us this information, and Cyril's obviously being played like a fiddle. And then Luthen basically is like, he's like, Cassian, you won't do it. I'll send Vel and Cinta to do it and help these rebels out. And so, like, they have this very organized plan. They all have weapons, but then at the same time, Vel instructs all of the rebels to not bring a blaster. Like, we are the only ones that are going to do blasters, like Vel and Cinta. And then they do the successful raid, but then there's just a guy that comes out and it's like, what's going on here? And then they get into a scuffle, and then one of the rebels shoots Cinta by accident. That comes off the heels of basically Vel and Cinta. They're always like this, will they, won't they, will they ever talk again kind of little arc between them. And they finally like get together and they like kind of confess a little bit, and they go out on this mission together. And then all of a sudden she's dead. It sort of becomes like a very like instructive moment for for everyone. It's kind of like for Vel, because you see her in the first season, she's very determined to be like the covert agent, but also just like being involved in these raids. And from that point on, well, first of all, she has to give the Gorman rebel a very stern talking to, being like, okay, like, you need to remember this. You need to like redeem yourself for your sins, basically, in the
For the rest
future.
of your life, right?
Yeah, for the rest of your life, and like you need to understand what you've just done and like who you've killed. Like she was a great person, but then also for Vel, kind of as a transition for her to be like, you know what, like maybe I shouldn't be out in the field as often. And then you see her kind of the rest of the show like on Yavin, basically just assisting the people, like training people at the base and all this other stuff, and she kind of separates from Luthen after that point, where it's just like, what is it worth it for me to like just keep going on these stupid little raids for Luthen? It's kind of like you know, we need to be more, it's sort of an evolution, where a turning point where she's like, maybe Luthen's way isn't the best way to do these things. Maybe we should you know, we need to be more unified in our efforts and not be as covert about things. And we need to like help people like come together, sort of thing. Again, from the Gorman side, it's about this guy's got a very like, he feels bad. He feels super bad, and he feels like at a certain point he's got to make it up to someone. And we'll talk about it, but obviously that does happen.
The way that they're selling off Luthen, right? It's a great point to bring up, because on the other end of a Luthen Rael is one of the titular characters that have somehow appeared in multiple projects at this point. And obviously one of the biggest things is that he's played by the brilliant Forrest Whitaker in Rogue One. Saw Gerrera is a huge part of this show. He's obviously one of the main like kind of turning points in the movie Rogue One, and his character makes appearances played by different folks in the Clone Wars series. But he's always been the rebel that kind of takes it a step too far, right? Like he's kind of pegged like that. And what's interesting about the Luthen comp to Gerrera is in season one they have that speech where it's like, oh, they're actually kind of seem like they're getting along together, and he's like talking with him about like, oh yeah, this is like kind of how far we need to take things to really win the battles. Like that's Saw Gerrera's whole thing. It's like we fight to win, which is also Luthen's thing, right? Like Luthen says stuff like that along the way to many of his people, especially to um, folks that he's directly sending out into the field. But Saw always takes it 3, 4, or 5 steps further. Um, it's interesting to think that you'd go back to a base like Yavin, and there are probably people looking at Luthen in the exact same way that they talk about Saw Gerrera, which is very negative. Someone who's just a thorn in their side. But in the scene where those two talk in the previous season, Luthen's like, we got to work together with people. I also just have different ways of looking at my value of different humans that I have to work with. And that's just like the bird, like again, like he says many times in all of his like monologues and dope ass dialogue with other characters, like I carry this burden because I know the weight that it takes and I know what it takes to win. But I've always just thought of Luthen as a more effective member of the rebellion, even though he's not technically a member of that organized part on Yavin, than someone like Saw Gerrera is. I mean, and you get the entire scene with Saw Gerrera just huffing, what is it, Rylon? He's huffing gas. He's huffing gas out there. And he's telling him, he's like, you got to be a certain level of crazy. When I think he's talking to Willman, right?
Willman,
Who's
yeah.
sent out there to just make that connect, to show someone how to use a certain thing, to only meet one of the craziest men in the galaxy, honestly. Someone who becomes, I could probably make the argument that he becomes less effective over time. Luthen kind of maintains his effectiveness, in my opinion, up until the very end. But Saw is so far off on another planet and how he sees the rebellion. But I don't know how much of that kind of rubbed off on people, especially Willman. It's just crazy that he kind of like refers to like, you got to be huffing gas to be about this. Like we live this life. The rebellion is all that matters, and nothing else beyond it. You got to be cautious of every single person that you're with. Yeah, you're not given a whole lot in necessarily the arc to connect that back to Gorman. I think it's maybe just like an interesting note before I'm going to throw it over to you. We get into the next arc. Luthen and Cassian had their heart to heart at the end of episode 6. What if all of this planet is destroyed? The simple response is that if it does burn, it's going to burn very brightly. And that's kind of what happens in this scene. It's not even kind of what happens in the upcoming arc. BBY2 Messenger, who are you? Welcome to the rebellion. One of the greatest 3 episode stretches I've experienced in anything nerd related, IP related, anything from a favorite television show of mine, if we're going to talk about the Successions of the world, etc., Severance, Breaking Bad, this is one of those arcs you look back on and you're like, this left an imprint on my brain, and like the chemistry of how I approach this entire story of the massacre of Gorman. It's one of the saddest things in Star Wars history. It's referred to in many parts of the canon, especially in the Rebels television show, as one of the main reasons Mon Mothma, as we eventually find out, defects away from the Senate. But Chris, from the get-go, you can already tell things are really tense. I remember when you were texting me about it because you caught these 3 episodes a few days before I did with Jonas. But I'm just going to let you take it away from here because this has also left an incredible effect on how you look at the rest of this show.
Well, no, I mean, Gorman is a powder keg at this point, ready to blow. I love the fact that you spend 3 episodes basically on that planet when you see a bit of the start of Imperial occupation, where it's like people are still walking, like public life is still like decent. Like people are walking around this plaza, they're going to the hotels, they're doing stuff in the street, and there's a little bit of Imperial presence, but it's not enough to where people can't go out on the street and like do stuff. But then you come back after a year and all of a sudden there's no one on this plaza, and it's all like basically the Empire has just made it the plaza their little base of operations while they're finishing out their armory and all this other stuff. And like people are getting pissed. It's obviously all an intentional slow burn from the Empire to basically again agitate more and more people to join a rebellion and insurgency that can be painted as radical and not satisfactory from the Empire standard, something you can spin to the public. And then so it's interesting, yeah, that episode before, Who Are You, is just sort of this big setup. You mean, okay, like something is going to happen here. Like Cassian, you need to get down there. You need to. Well, first of all, they want to kill Dedra. I know that's Cassian's main mission. It's like, oh, she's running Gorman, and like she's been after Axis and all this other stuff. And so it's like they're not there to stop a massacre. Luthen has sent Cassian down there to basically just like, you need to carry out this mission. Don't matter what else is happening here. You need to carry this thing out. Like whatever, like you sort of said, whatever happens on Gorman happens, but you need to do this thing for me. And so he goes back down there and he sees what's going on. And then like, people are at this boiling point where it's like, we're arming ourselves, we're getting weapons, we're going to go out in the street. And then we get to the actual like, scene of the crime where it's like the Gorman massacre. And you see from the very beginning, you see the morning of. I love that you see the whole process to how you get to a point where the massacre happens. You get these, first of all, you get the Imperial cadets. You get these very green, like young looking guys who are just, terrified to be there. They're just like, we're just here. You can just tell from the very beginning, because like, even Dedra's like, these guys they're boys. Even she realizes, like, she starts to get a little weird about it. And then they're just setting up barricades. And then Cassian is seeing all this from his hotel. He's being like, yeah, they're setting this up. Like, he's calling Willem, and he's like, they want this to happen. Like they want people to come out in the streets and demonstrate. And so when people show up, they're very, very, they slide very neatly into these barricades. They're doing chants and all this stuff. They eventually start singing their anthem. But as we sort of get there, the Empire starts mobilizing their forces. The captain is there to sort of, this very mean white looking dude is there to sort of carry out the orders that Dedra is basically in name only carrying out. And you get like stormtroopers surrounding this plaza on all sides as the protesters come in. And this is the most intimidating the stormtroopers have ever looked. They basically just do nothing but walk forward and go down on the steps on the plaza and just hold their guns up and just look at them. It's like they're just lifeless entities ready to kill somebody.
They're lifeless entities, and what makes it even more scary is that these are not clones that are programmed to act like this. These are people that decided to join the Empire, and they decided to be on the side of Emperor Palpatine, and carry out all orders directly. Brilliant point about bringing up the folks, or the boys, really, right? There's no need to call them adults. Like when they had to come in and get that done, to have it begin right with not only the beautiful singing of their anthem, the chant about the galaxy is watching, like very ominous type stuff. Dedra's having also probably one of the worst days of her life. Not that it matters more than the Gormans that were murdered in the streets of Palmo, right? Like she, from the very beginning of this episode, from the very beginning of this arc, there's a bit of intrigue, right? Because Part Gaz is calling in and checking in with her in her basement level area, still far away from anything Cyril has any idea she's doing behind his back. Um, Being told basically the Emperor has great interest in what is going on in your neck of the woods. Would you not be excited if your big boss, especially the Emperor Palpatine, is talking about your secret mission you're carrying it out? And like you said, they bring in characters like Captain Kaido. Like Captain Kaido is scary, and that dude, you would be led to believe that he is actually like the higher person in command. Like he's wearing a darker suit, he's got the cape, got that scar on his face. He looks intimidating, the kind of guy that the Emperor would love to have in the upper ranks of the Empire. But like you said, in name only, like when push came to shove, he kind of cheekily says something Dedra along the lines of, I respect chain of command, or something along that line when it came to what you'd have to assume was the call that she made, because you don't hear it in the dialogue. The call Dedra has to make to the sniper to start the massacre, and the reason to start the massacre by using friendly fire from a sniper on the roof. She basically, in my opinion, has to order that sniper to kill one of the boys who are all always going to send out there as cattle fodder, to give them a reason to mow everyone down in the way they did.
To get into specifics there, basically Captain Kaido tells Dedra to give the order, and then she just says proceed in a very whimpery voice. And then all of a sudden, right away after he hears that, he gets on the horn and he's like, channel 5, like, he's calling to the sniper, like, are you ready to go? Like, go, fire. And then yeah, they start with friendly fire, because like, no, right now it's just it's just ready to blow. The whole plaza is ready to blow. But then once that happens, they carry out the order, and the sniper is just like, you can tell he wants to do it. And yeah, he fires that first shot. The commander of the cadets freaks out, and then he shoots the first Gorman, and then it's on. And then everyone's just in the street. Everyone is getting mowed down, and Cassian is trying to shoot Dedra, but then also Cyril is realizing like what is happening, and is like, what are we doing here? Like, what I thought I was just gonna root out some rats, And then it's at that point where Dedra reveals to Cyril that this is all to mine the planet for a weapon. And then he another sort of very traumatic scene where he like chokes her, like he grabs her neck and chokes her. It's like, it's a very like, especially for Star Wars, but just like in general, like TV, that's a very tense, very like uncomfortable moment. Basically, like these people have known each other, they've sort of been together for years, they work together, and it's like, you know, that physical harm and like that loss of just complete trust between them is, even though very little trust to begin with, but it's just like, it's the start of like Cyril's collapse of his entire worldview, and it happens so quickly, where it's just like he starts realizing he has first of all, he's got some backbone now. You can tell like all of this, like he's been leading up to this whole thing where like he's sort of, his life is controlled by sort of these very like strong faced like women in his life, first the mom and then Dedra. But then he kind of grows a spine a little bit for himself, kind of in the last moments of his life, and he's kind of like, okay, this is like, what is happening here? Like, I thought the Empire was supposed to be law and order. I thought we were like rooting out like injustice, or like rooting out insurgency and like irresponsible people. But it's like, no, we're gonna we just want to mine this planet. We want to blow up this planet. And he goes out into the plaza while the massacre is happening, and he's just like so overwhelmed about like what's going on. And you got something to say here.
Well, he's even had that conversation at this point with Caro Rylands, right? The titular father figure, one of the leaders of the Gorman people, someone who is actively trying to get the Gormans to not go into the plaza, because he is like, he knows this is Hut, this is cooked. This is
He's come all the way around. He's come all the way around on it.
This is the same guy who stared straight into Cassian Andor's eyes when Andor is in one of his get-ups, right? One of his costume that Luthen's got him in to keep his identity a complete secret in that tiny part of the Gorman city they all get prepped in. And Caro is just like, what kind of, I don't know, he's just like, I'm disappointed basically in the type of rebel or the type of person that I would be told by Luthen is going to come here and help us. But even and he came full circle, like you're saying, doesn't understand why everyone is running in, because he knows it's a trap, and he runs in. He has a run in with Cyril before Cyril has his complete crash out. And Caro says one of the most poignant things that I think any character in the show has said, when he's just like, "What kind of being are you?" What kind of being are you is a crazy thing to tell to another person. It's like, what are you mining for? What is the real reason you're here? And Cyril has no freaking clue what is going on. And Carol's like, no, you are the enemy. Again, someone who will eventually be the one that takes Cyril out is here basically calling him human and being like, you are just a no better than any of these others fools. I was a fool to believe you to begin with, or to even trust you, even a little bit.
Yeah, like all of the concepts, all the relationships he's built in his life and his entire worldview, again, everything about his life is completely shattered. And this is a moment, forgot where I heard it, but it was like, this is a moment in a normal character's arc in a show or movie where it's like the midpoint of their arc. They realize that their worldview was wrong, and they begin sort of the slow kind of like come up and like the ascent into realizing your mistakes and like coming around and knowing what you actually fight for and who's on the side of like justice and law and order. But he obviously does not get that chance because in his last action, he sees the man that he's been pursuing for the entire show and who's sort of been very front and center of his mind for years. And it's Cassian. And he sees him and he just snaps. He unknowingly saves his girlfriend, but also he's just again in that moment he's just in a fit of rage, like I must kill this guy because I have nothing else left. My entire worldview is shattered, but I gotta kill this guy. And then they get in a fist fight, which in the sort of behind the scenes they talk about all the how it's choreographed, and it was very interesting. But it's like it's just so raw. It's one fight in Star Wars, one of the best fights in Star Wars because it doesn't involve very like timed out choreography. It doesn't look like choreography. There's no lightsabers. There's no force. It's just two dudes just trying to beat each
Just
other up. Like
wrestling.
Andor's playing defense, but Cyril is trying to kill him. He's like there, and he's just with all of the rage in his heart. He's just being like, I have to end this man. But then Cassian is obviously the much more experienced fighter, so he quickly overwhelms him, and then a grenade blows up in his face. And
There's a
then
war zone.
yeah,
There's something crazy happening around them.
yeah, no, it's a war zone. So it's like this little it's this little fight inside of a giant war zone that has nothing to do with what's going on, really. But it's just like it's this personal vendetta. It's like all these stories sort of come to a head in this great episode. But then obviously we get the title of the episode. Cyril has Cassian on the ground at gunpoint. Like his life has been leading up to this, and Cassian just tells him like, "Who are you?" And it's at that moment where his entire everything is gone. Everything's shattered. I've been thinking about this guy my entire life, and he knows nothing about me. He does not care to remember my face. He doesn't know we've met before. And this guy I've been pursuing just doesn't care. And then he has pause, and then he gets shot in the head before he can
Carol's
sort of
the one to take him
consider
out.
everything that's just happened to him. He gets shot in the head, and his life is over.
And there is no better analogy, there's no better way to end Cyril Karn's life than basically where it started, which was a nothing burger in the greater plans of the Empire. The perfect example of someone who may have thought that because of the place that they had ended up, or because, they're just a citizen of Coruscant and they've gotten put into this position. I believe he gets one of his jobs originally because one of his uncles is high up in the not the ISB, but in some backroom administrative role for the Empire, which is what gets him back on this track again. Like he thinks that again, the minnow type mentality of being like, I may be small, but I feel like I control this situation, to just being completely overwhelmed by someone that's worked harder than you, has been through more traumatic stuff, has learned from that trauma, and is still about a bigger issue, is still about something much bigger than himself. Like when you put Cassian next to Cyril as a direct comp, Cyril has kind of made himself believe that he's a part of a bigger thing. He's tricked himself, and Dedra's tricked him, and even I think earlier before this we might have skipped over one of my low key favorite scenes from the entire season is when Part Gaz is praising Cyril, and Cyril's like, "This is the greatest day of my life," and he's so dead ass about it. And it's what makes his toxic relationship with Dedra so believable because of course he would put up with that until he finally breaks. And this breaking point, like you said, is where many characters might have the opportunity to be better, but that's not how war works. That's not how this massacre is happening. That's not how this battle is going down. You have completely screwed over the Gormans in a way that you will never understand. Now all these Gorman bodies lay dead in the street, and Caro has no reason not to shoot him in the head, right? And that's what's so significant about the moment. that it almost I had to roll back the scene to be like, what even took him out? Was it a stray bullet? Was it Carol Rylance as it ended up being? Cyril Karn, not a victim necessarily, but I feel like a very real character of what many people, again, like if you're put in a situation where you're led to believe something like the Empire is the ultimate good, like the maybe not the ultimate good, but something where, I believe in the Emperor giving us peace and serenity over the galaxy where there wasn't any of that before, right? And how they're able to control the message leads to someone like Cyril Karn existing and feeling like he can make a difference, even though his life ended up meaning nothing.
Yeah, it's kind of that real world parallel where it's like he's a lonely man. He's a lonely, broken man with no purpose, and he sees the strong man who projects like this aura of like again law, order, and justice, and feels like that's the right way to go because that gives him some purpose in his life. But again, this is not the empire of law and order. This is the empire. They're just all about chaos. In that one scene, everyone realizes it. Even Cyril does. And again, like so funny that when Rylance kills him, and Cassian is basically like sort of dragged out, they just look at each other. He doesn't ask about that guy. He was like, "You wanted to kill him for some reason, whatever." It's again even after that whole moment, and he asks like, "Who are you?" He still really doesn't care. It's just kind of like, I just need to go. I just need to leave. I don't have any time to talk to this man about what this was. Like this was just a very weird like blip on the radar for Cassian. And again, that's sort of the tragedy of Cyril is that right after he's gone, no one cares except for his mom, which is at the very end. You see her at the end. She's watching sort of the fake Imperial News report, sort of the manipulated sort of story of it, and you can tell in her face that she's pretty sure that Cyril died. She didn't see it on the TV at all, but she's pretty sure that he died.
Well, it's so fitting that that's just the last time we see any of those characters too. It's like
Yeah,
the last time we see Carol Rylance. Like the people of Gorman have been decimated, whether or not they're all dead. I mean, you learn eventually, right? Homie's girlfriend makes it off the Wilman's girlfriend makes it off the planet with him, obviously, but you'd have to assume most of the planet before it was just mined to oblivion was killed in that one moment because Palma is just a capital city. It's just one place, but for that to basically lead into what I'm sure they sieged the rest of the area to kill everyone that didn't make it out safely.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
this is what Cyril Karn did. This is what a Cyril Karn can do.
Yeah, that's true. I'm pretty sure it's implied that like after the massacre, most people are like sort of taken off the planet or exterminated, and the because they talk about there's mining ships everywhere. Multiple people throughout the show, they're like, yeah, there's mining ships all over the planet. Like, what's going on here? The other thing too is like you're sort of talking about the kind of the uptick now is that we meet the most fitting way possible in this entire show, and I'm so glad they did it this way. K2SO as in his original programming as a KX droid. And the first thing I'll say is that the KX droids, there's like 6 of them. When they come out, they're so intimidating. Like there's one, first Cyril meets them they're all meeting in the holding room. And I'm pretty sure it's implied that like the one that looks directly at Cyril is probably K2SO because he's just like so
Has to
interested
be.
in like staring at him and like his eyes dilate, which is so interesting. But then once they're in action, they're ruthless. They're ruthless killing machines. They throw people everywhere. They're able to kick barricades with force. The moment you touch them, you're just gone. And then, there's the one of the last like real big like actiony scenes in that whole massacre is when Cassian and Wilman are like trying to be like, okay, like what do we do? What do we do? And then everyone is like running away from the KX droid because he's just thrown a guy against the wall. And he slowly makes his way towards Cassian and Wilman, and their blasters are doing nothing. And then we get the rebel guy who accidentally killed Cinta, take an Imperial transport and cut him in half. He cuts the KX droid in half and just stops him dead in his tracks. Once that moment is over, again, most of the fighting at this point is over. And Cassian just like, oh, what's up? I remember you. Like, thank you. And it's so interesting that he says thank. He's one of the only people he actually thanks for something, like thanks for their service. And it's kind of like his little redemption arc for that one guy. Again, I'm blanking on the name. You can sort of fill me in on the name, but it's just so interesting because that again, it's that little arcs, those little tiny satisfying arcs inside of this bigger story where he feels like he has sort of, he has redeemed himself even more than he realizes he's redeemed himself. Because obviously K2 they take the droid to be reprogrammed, and it becomes like a very like, big asset for stealing the Death Star plans eventually.
Who Are You is one of those episodes that I think is just going to stick with me for the long run. I mean, it sounds like it's going to do the same with you. It's
Yeah.
something that even like where it ends. And we've obviously talked a lot about one episode, and we have one more from this arc that's like equally important in many ways. But Who Are You ends so morbidly and quiet. Like I even think the ending credits kind of shift up a little bit if it's just the Gorman anthem or something along the lines of that. That brings us to the end of that episode. You're catapulted into Welcome to the Rebellion, which is kind of the switch. It's Mon Mothma's time to shine. Mon is basically aware of what's happened. Folks are aware of what's gone down. There's a split in opinion. There's folks who believe the Imperial news, which are, we killed the insurgents, we took down the terrorists, using very pointed words against the entire group of people they just took out in the Palmo Square. Mon obviously knows what's up. Bail Organa recast very oddly, but shout out Benjamin Bratt. But those
He's good
two,
though. He's
obviously,
good
he's
though, I
great.
will say. Yeah, I think he's very
I
good.
like him. Bail Organa says shit for the first time ever. Shout out Bail, lore accurate Bail. But this is Mon's episode for one reason and one reason only. It's something that's even alluded to in the Rebels series, and I think just played out much better, obviously much better in Tony Gilroy's golden hands for her final speech, basically to the Senate. They had to work around some irregularities in the rules, and ironically enough, it seems like even when Luthen sends Cassian out to do the rescue op, they're even a little concerned that there might be a mole. And Mon Mothma is so fed up with everything that's happening. She's like, do I even believe Luthen telling me there's a mole in my group that's supposed to get me off the planet once I give this speech? Like, they have the plan, but she's like, how on earth am I not supposed to even believe Bail Organa? Like, you learn that Bail has no idea that they've been infiltrated. But again, it's one of Lana Young's agents that he's able to pass along the info to Luthen in a smart way to be like, hey, trust me, go with the person who tells you I have friends everywhere. And it's something that sends her into a complete spiral, very understandably, because she already knows what's gone down on Gorman. This news is already spread throughout the galaxy really rapidly. I mean, this happens over the course of basically the 24 hours following the massacre being broadcast, right? I mean, even her assistant comes out and is like, I'm so sorry. I've been lying to you. I've been an agent of Luthen this entire time. Imagine being in Mon Mothma's shoes when she has to basically do the biggest thing she's ever done in her life. One of the iconic moments of this battle, of this 20-year build up to having the rebellion be as assembled as they are. She's still dealing with bullshit. Like, she's still got to be like, who can I trust? But at the end of the day, she does lean on the people she can trust more than anyone. Bail Organa throws her the softball in hilarious way that's kind of like, look, I kind of looked at it in the way that like our Congress will have a filibuster, or there'll be a rule that basically is a way for someone to stand in and speak where maybe they're not given the right to by the parliamentarian or whatever. So it's little bits like that I'm like, yeah, Star Wars is politics at the end of the day. It's all politics. George Lucas was right.
I like that it's a triple pass because it doesn't start with Bail. There's a different senator that hands the baton to Bail, and then Bail invokes an emergency rule. It's like some weird subsection. He's very explicitly decreed by the Emperor's Council. He's like, so the Emperor's Council made this rule that if we call something an emergency and no one is disputed it's called an emergency, we said emergency so many times. I just want to make sure that you know it's an emergency. Because it's an emergency and I have the power to do this in an emergency, I can now hand the baton to any senator that I want. And so it's like, okay, Mon Mothma's coming out there. So yeah, it was very realistically this political weird bureaucracy rules that, trying to find loopholes in certain things to get Mon Mothma to the floor. But then once she's on the floor, obviously, again, she practices the speech a few times. And you see it a little bit in Rebels, but again, it's the full speech here. And it's basically all about, again, not only that the Emperor is a monster, but it's like, again, the Senate has lost its grip on truth. And when we lose our grip on truth, we'll basically believe the loudest person in the room, basically. So it's like, again, she's basically denouncing the entire Senate and the Emperor and the Empire structure. It's like, we can't trust this anymore. We've all been asleep at the wheel for so long, and the Emperor is behind all of it. And I just love the little like machinations, even from like the sort of the workers in the Senate being like, we did our job. And like, there's that one guy trying to shut down the feed. All these people trying to like shut down the feed, but like everything's all sewn up for a long time that the Mon Mothma can sort of get the speech in. But again, obviously, it is her big moment where she becomes public enemy number one and like a rebel person. Again, it's not a secret anymore. And that's at that point where she meets Cassian and the whole I have friends everywhere and sort of the start of their friendship and basically being like, like welcome to the rebellion. Obviously, that's the name of the episode. But yeah, I'll let you take it from there.
I love Cassian Andor walking up in there and being like, "I'm part of the Mid-Rim News. Never heard of you. We're
Yeah.
trying to change that, right?" And it kind of speaks to a little bit of the ineptitude of the ISB at the end of the day, even though they're like the secret police. Like they're still got people that are probably looking at their job in kind of a way that many people look at their more mundane desk work. It's like, do I have to do work every single second I'm here? I'm just kind of the guy to let people in and make sure they're not coming out and being too suspicious. He basically ends up letting in the guy, as in Cassian, directly to the one person in this entire complex they're trying to arrest and take out. In the middle of all that, I really enjoyed the little bit where the two random Empire workers are like giving this one guy the reason of why they can't access the vault to shut off. They're like, "Yeah, the rules changed last week. What are you gonna do? We did what we were told we were gonna do." And then there's this really like seething ISB agent that's like super evil, and they're just like, "What are you gonna do? It's not my fault." And it's just little bits like that again. Like it goes back to the manifesto. It's like little bits of rebellion, even if they're not like taken as seriously as like a Luthen or Cassian. So again, plays very well into the entire escape scene that ends up happening. Cassian gets our girl Mon out of there ASAP. Bale's got to stick behind. But I think it's even better when Mon is basically being thrown into one of the darker parts of the rebellion she's about to join, which is you got to understand that there are going to be bodies that lay in your path. And like she is the one character in the show that has not had to deal with that fully up until this moment. Like, sure, her best friend had to get offed in the first arc by Luthen, but she's seen people. She's seen her driver get killed. A character who I didn't even know showed up in one of the top 10 most appearances in the show. It comes from her driver, who's the secret ISB agent, right? The plant, who's also just terrible at his job, but has been sticking around the entire night to be like, where is Mon? He can't even tell anyone in ISB what's going on, and ends up getting himself killed. Even the person who was the rat, the young person, the young plant was who ended up being a rat, got offed as well. Like these guys are incompetent. Like they're so comically evil or incompetent across the board that it's almost like Cassian is so well prepared for all of these little interaction that Mon is like, what the hell is happening? He's mowing down everyone.
I like that you brought up the sort of the again killing Chloris and those other the ISB agent because I like those two interactions because there's a little bit of they find ways to induce a little bit of hesitation in the ISB agents before they kill them. Because that one Chandrillan guy who's the Mon Mothma aide is like she's a rebel spy, and then like everyone like hesitates and all that stuff, and then he kills her. And then when they see Chloris on the bridge, it's like he goes like, what's his name? Andor asks Mothma like, what's his name? What's his name? Chloris. And it's like Chloris, and he like shouts the names like we found her, and then he hesitates a little bit like who are you? And then boom, just pops. It's like again, it shows like the combat, the close quarters like veteran stuff. It's like you got to make someone hesitate just a little bit, and then you got them. And like you said, she's now exposed to welcome to the rebellion. Like she's exposed to this sort of this darker, more like pragmatic part where it's like, we gotta get you off this planet. Like, I'm sorry, we have to kill people. We have to like there's gonna be people that are gonna try to stand in our way, and we can't let them. We got to get them out of our way.
It's honestly kind of messed up that once they eventually get out of there, they get back to the Coruscant stronghold apartment where everyone's sitting to transfer her off to the Yavin people. Then I'm like, damn, Cassian Andor, one of the realest characters in Star Wars, Luthen Rael, all of these hard ass characters that are so dope. And like, I love Rebels, but the idea that they had to ham it off to the people on the Ghost, I was like, come on. I was like, that's kind of hilarious, but also I'm like, damn, to go from Andor to Rebels is a crazy 1-to-1 because then eventually you find out that the members of the Ghosts that are the stars of Rebels, like Ezra Bridger, all of the folks like Chopper that are on the crew, are the ones that pick up Mon Mothma to take her to a new place before Yavin and before they're ready for her at Yavin. So I really enjoyed a moment where like basically we have two of the main characters of the show finally get to spend one full episode with each other. And yeah, they interact in the movie and a little bit towards the final arc that we're about to get into, but Mon Mothma just simply being like, I will never know how to thank you. Cassian responds simply with "Make it worth it," and there's nothing more Andor than an interaction like that because they just went through all of this stuff that would change any normal person's life but they understand that this is not normal times and they are rising to the occasion in a place that they don't have the privilege or luxury to mourn, grieve, or even take the time to understand where they lay in the galaxy or like what are the moral standings of what's going on. Cassian has learned how to do it. And I think it's something really powerful in Mon being like, look, I don't even have to say anything. I'm just going to say, like, I thank you for what you did for me today. And we just leave it at that. There's nothing else to be said.
Yeah, and as we sort of close out this episode, there the obviously the last scene with Bix, and even earlier with Clay, who we'll definitely get into in this last arc. Cassian says multiple times that he's done. He's like, I'm gonna do this thing and then I'm done. And then Clea's basically the first person to sort of challenge him on that, being like, you're done. And he's like, I just want to do what I want. And then she's like, well, isn't that what we're fighting for? I thought I was just being like, it's such a great like rebuttal of just be like, yeah, like what do you think you can do what you want? It's like we're fighting so that everyone can do what they want. And so he does, he carries out the mission and all this stuff, and then he gets back to Bix and he says the same thing, but obviously in a different context, like, I'm done. Like I just wanna like be with you. I just wanna, let's travel. Let's just do some of all the stuff we've always wanted to do. And then like Bix doesn't want to say, she's like hesitates to be like, okay, and obviously there's she says that
up
later she's not like brave enough to say it in front, but then obviously they go to sleep and they wake up the next morning and Bix has left this message being basically like, like you need to be here. And I guess we can also too get into the force healer that Bix sends Andor to earlier on in the arc, where basically it's like I sent it, like the guise is that he's got like a shoulder injury or back injury, and you need to see someone to sort of heal the arm. But then it's like the force healer basically says, like, I see something in you. There's something about you that is very, very special. And he's kind of freaks him out a little bit. And then Bix is just kind of like, didn't you see that? Like, she's not even sure why she said that, but she just like feels something about you. Like you're supposed to be here, sort of thing. And then that's sort of reinforced when, Bix ends up leaving and basically being like, it was a tough choice to make, but I'm going to make it for you. You need to be here. Like, I know that you love me and you care about me, but like, you need to be here. These people need you. You need to lead these people, and we need to win. And then like and the most tragic line is that like, after we win, we can do what we want. And that was the moment where you're just like, the whole arc leaves you speechless, but to end it like that, you're just like, oh man, that's devastating.
She chose the rebellion. When she says it so directly that I am choosing the rebellion, it is one of the hardest things anyone has ever said in Star Wars, let alone this show. And exactly like you said, like to actually end it more on the line, you don't have to say it out loud. They don't know in the moment, but to use the power again, like Tony Gilroy is saying, like the beauty of knowing how things end is that you can really like you can swing in places that you couldn't swing if the audience wasn't aware of where this was going. Um, so we say that RIP to the Bix Andor relationship, because that is just the last place I thought that was going to go. And one more shout out to K2SO, who we all know is coming in. We gotta get a nice little scene with Alan Tudyk killing it as K2SO. But I'm gonna kind of treat this last little arc as a full movie. Let's talk about all of it. We're already 2.5 hours in to the Megapod. But you jump one more year, and where else would we start this final arc of Andor than with Luthen and in my opinion, more importantly, Clea. It's probably the most that we've ever gotten out of Clea. It's something that's really, I think, conceptualized how I see her character throughout both seasons. She is one of the glue figures that we haven't talked a bit about, but almost wanted to save it for this portion because this is her episode to basically look. We've always been curious about what her relationship was with Luthen. It's basically a pseudo daughter figure. But Luthen on the Switch side of that, right? I'm going to preface this by saying that we learn about their relationship through a little bit of a flashback I appreciated, especially how it was superimposed with how things go down throughout the episode. Luthen, you find out, maybe is a member of the Empire, maybe is one of these like mud troopers or whatnot. But Luthen is a sergeant in this army taking out Leia's, you'd have to assume, village or town. These soldiers are calling the humans it, and like, we got to kill it. We got to kill all of them. And the only person who sounded like they survived was Clea. And that's only because Luthen, in that one moment, he keeps repeating himself, like, make it stop. You see the birth of like what causes Luthen to leave his life behind and whatever his name was to begin with, right? Like they obviously all changed. At one point he's like, "My name is Luthen, and you're now Clea." Like that's who we are for the rest of our lives together. Luthen has found almost a disciple, right? But someone that he's not super willing at first to really bring into all of these conversations. But you see exactly why Clea is the way she is. She's incredibly capable. She's cutthroat. She is the lady. She is the woman in the chair. Like she is like one of the actual main glue pieces to all of these arcs and types of trials that Luthen has put his people through over the years. And none of this happens without Clea, but you see why and basically what it took to get her there. Clea's seen people mowed down in the street. Clea's learned how to bargain. Clea's learned how to play different characters from Luthen. Like she is truly Luthen's daughter, which makes it even more right. Like we basically, I'm going around the main point of what goes down. These are all superimposed in between Luthen basically on his deathbed because Luthen, as I'm sure you'll tell us here in a second, Chris, gets a chance to finally meet with Dedra. It is very unexpected because this is like far and far in between one of the most important interactions in the entire show. It's only 5 minutes long. Got to shout out Lonnie Young one more time as well. Rest in peace, our legend. Did Luthen have to kill Lonnie once Lonnie told Luthen about the Death Star and that Dedra was on his ass? So crazy that's how he goes out. But I'm on the side of like Luthen did what he had to do. And it's very in line with what he's done traditionally throughout the entire show.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to take in there for sure. I mean, the first thing is that like Clea feels like she was sort of dispositioned to be the way that she is, but she's very hardened by what she sees and also Luthen's guidance. Basically, sort of, it's kind of like she's a sword, and like Luthen, the experience are just like sharpen it. It's like sharpen the sort of determination, being like she's like, I'm going to do this. I'm gonna fight for this, no matter. And in her way, she's doing the radios. She's carrying out little missions here and there, which is so interesting. And again, I was not expecting that was not on my bingo card to end the series with sort of the Luthen on his deathbed, and then also just that Luthen dying, probably you could call it, but the whole relationship between Luthen and Clea I thought was a really cool way to end it, because it is kind of, again, well, she carries out the mission. You can sort of see the culmination of everything that she learns, that she realizes that Luthen is like, they're trying to keep Luthen alive, and I need to make sure that he's dead, because that is what we do. We need to, at this point, she realizes that Luthen is the leak, even though she loves Luthen and they like love each other and they care about each other a lot. Like, this needs to happen. Like I have to go in there, get him off the ventilation, and make sure that he's dead, so he can't say anything. Can't use any devices on him. And so you get there. It's sort of, again, the culmination of all she's done. And then they have to now extract her. She basically makes like a desperate call to Yavin, which at this point is an almost fully formed rebel base. And that's something that you sort of see throughout the 3 years. You see like the formation of the base, and there's more people coming in. They reprogrammed K2 at this point. Cassian and Melshi and K2, they all play like games together, and you sort of see the dynamic. It's like they're just kind of chilling. They're all sort of, the rebels are sort of unified in their cause, but they need this piece of information to basically like, what are we fighting against? They don't really know. Right now, they're just trying to figure out, train and figure out how to rebel against the Empire. But this is the last piece of information they need. And so when she calls, they don't know. Well, first of all, they don't know it's her, which is so interesting. They think it's Luthen. And there's this whole debate about like whether we should trust Luthen. And then Cassian is like, none of us would be here without Luthen. And it's this whole thing where like the senators are very like, that have only been in the rebellion for a fraction of the time and have done, 1/20th of the effort that Cassian and Luthen have done. It's like, Cassian's like, no, he doesn't lie to him. He died for this. It's like, we have to pursue, if he's calling out to us through this way, we got to go get him. And then obviously Clea is just like so traumatized. She's like, okay, they're going to get me, sort of thing. And they go to Coruscant, and then they find her, and it's like, Clea is so like, she's very in the mentality of Luthen to the very end. It's like, she's very like, like, you need to, I have the information, you need to get it to the base. And Cassian is very insistent, like, we're not doing this Luthen's way anymore. Like, you are coming with me. I thought that was such a powerful moment, being like, you don't have to end the way that Luthen ended. You don't have to, like, I know what he said, but it's like, I think it's Cassian sort of like sort of acknowledging to her, like, you don't need to die. Like, you can tell this to yourself. And like, this is the sunrise that Luthen did not see. I think everyone sort of recognizes that moment. It's like, you know, he died so that you could keep going. I think that's the one thing is like, and then once they get back, they get her off the planet. That's just kind of like a cool scene where K2, throws people around. But they get her off the planet. They bring her to Yavin, and she's all like torn up and like depressed and all this other stuff for very obvious reasons. But then when she sees Vel, she was not expecting to see Vel. And then Vel immediately recognized, like, Clea, like, it's me, Vel. I just thought that was such a cool moment because she wasn't expecting to see her. Like, she didn't know who was like alive or dead, I think. And then she just like, gives her a hug. And then she's like so overwhelmed. And at the end, she basically just gets to like rest. She gets to wake up on Yavin in the forest in a bed. And she watches all these rebels like doing the training. And then, everyone's basically saying like take pride in this. And you can see at the very end, she has a little bit of a smirk, a little bit of a smile, where she's like, you know what? I did have something to do with this. I did play a role, and now I can rest a little bit.
Well, even like you go back to the scene where Lonnie gets shot, and he's asking Luthen, he's like, look, where are you gonna take me? Before he knows that he's not making it off that bench. He's like, Yavin. And he says Yavin again. Because there's this like, it's a mythical place. The Empire doesn't know Yavin exists. Like, obviously, original and like future Star Wars fans alike like really hold Yavin in high regard. But we've only seen Yavin so far as slightly probably more structured, like almost like a version. I don't want to say a version of the Empire, but definitely a version of the Republic. And a version that they're trying to return to where like you need democracy and you need these like things that existed before. But those things do not exist in a time of rebellion, because things in like a rebellion, like if you're in a time of rebellion in the way that we've learned from Luthen, and like Clea has especially learned from Luthen, like they've had no room to be kind. They've had no room to care about the plants in their rooms. Like even before they end up going out and saving Clea on Coruscant, you can see that Melshi, K2SO, and Cassian have all pretty much turned the beautiful, like lush, upkept place that both Bix and Cassian called home for over a year. That when Bix leaves, it kind of turns into this gross little like boy pad, right? Like this is like a man cave now. Like there's no plants anymore. They're just drinking. They're playing dope cards and stuff.
There are plants because the last scene before Cassian leaves for the Ring of Kafrene, he waters plants. So I will say that's a little bit of correction I'll put on you.
He'll return to it, at least I believe. It looks dark in there. That's all I'll say, is that it looks desolate, looks more concrete than ever. Especially when in that first episode of the previous arc, when Bix and them are all still happy and having the time of their lives, really, before they go off into eventually where the series ends. It looks a lot more desolate. So Clea being in that place where she probably, like you said, was preparing herself just to be like, I'm going to go out here in a rain of fire, and to be saved and to have things go so much in a different direction than her whole life has been. Like things went well. Like it was messy. Luthen died. But you even look back on a scene with Luthen and Dedra, because I need to return to that just for a second here. When they are in the room together, both of their careers and both of their lives are over. Luthen's actual life is over. But Dedra, out of this, she's acting completely out of ego. Luthen is acting completely out of almost like a selfless moment. Like the most selfless moment in the entire series is him deciding to send Clea out, because he's like, look, Clea, you can make it. You play an important part in not being the one to kill all of our comms and make sure that we protect all the rebel cells that we've been talking with, because we know that she's on our ass now. We know Dedra's coming after us. But to have Dedra show up in such an egotistical way, where you find out from Krennic that this wasn't even and Partgaz, that this wasn't anything more than a personal raid that she decided to call on her own. She was never more powerful than anyone else. Like Luthen's power came from the collective, as bloody as his path was, even though Dedra's path is incredibly bloody as well. Like she just acted out her own thought that this was all about her from the beginning. And none of this, like that's the whole story at the end of Andor. None of the Empire is about the individuals. Like the Empire is about the Emperor. It's about consolidation of power. It's about control. And the rebellion is more than just one person. He stabs himself, like he kills himself knowing that his moment has come, even when they both take down the pleasantries. I really like the scenes that they have together where they're still kind of playing up each other's characters, right? Like it's Luthen's last chance to play this one guy that's basically carried him out all throughout Coruscant over 5 years. But to have him go out like that on his own accord and then to have his basically pseudo daughter take him out because that's what he would have wanted. On the other side of the coin, he would have wanted her to go out and live an amazing life. So she'll come around. She's still not there. Like Clay at the end of this is like, what the hell what the hell is this place? It's way too quiet. She lived her whole life in a different way. Like you said, to even have someone hug you after that is crazy. Have it be Vel too is important. She's like, you got to get some rest, man. Time to get some shut eye. Go sleep for like 36 hours. You've done your part for now. I'm sure there'll be another time when we need you. But mourn. Take this opportunity to mourn and move forward. And last note on K2, I just loved how he basically used Hertz's body as a human shield, even though he didn't need to. Shout out K2SO for always being there for the boys.
Yeah, and I think we're sort of at the very, very end now of this entire thing. And I think one thing I want to talk about is Cassian's last conversation with Bale, because he talks about Luthen and being like, you know what, I think if you guys would have met, you would have really gotten along. And I think that's because like their arcs are so parallel. It's like they both have taken on adopted daughters whose names both rhyme with Leia, and have basically sort of grown them and molded them into like the people that they became. Obviously, Leia goes on to become like a general of the rebellion and all this other stuff. And Clea, we don't really know. And which is so interesting because you would think that's another sort of defying expectations of the show. You would think that because a lot of these characters don't appear in Rogue One, that they'd all be dead. But it's like, no, like they're still around. Like we don't know what their future roles are in the rebellion and like, what they're doing during like a New Hope and the Empire Strikes Back. But it's like, they're there, it's like what they could be doing anything, it's kind of satisfying to know, like, even though we know Cassian dies in Rogue One and like all those characters in Rogue One, because they're trying to steal the plans and they die, those people might still be alive. Like, Vel and Clea may have made it to the end. Like, you don't know. It's kind of the fun little mystery of the show that I was not expecting to be left with. It's like, what's next for those people?
Tony Gilroy said in one of those final interviews that he was giving about these last couple of arcs of the show that he considers the 5 titular women of the show, Dedra, Mon, Clea, Bix, and Vel, for a show literally called Andor about Cassian and his ascent to where he'll end up in Rogue One. He considers those 5 women to be the center of, what this show is about. People who have experienced and expressed victory, pain, and how all that comes together in the lives that they live. Dedra ends up in Narkina 5. She has a terrible conversation where she is basically called a rebel by Krennic before Krennic does Krennic things, grabs her by the neck one more time. Like the way that Dedra's head has been played with, like physically and mentally throughout this entire season, has been immense. And for her to end up in the same place Cassian, already knowing that she doesn't have the gall, she does not have the guts to get out of that situation. She ends her arc so tragically. Not in a way where I'm sad for her, like she got what she deserved, but my goodness, to have it just come back around, you can't feel anything but sadness for someone but like Dedra. And on the flip side, someone like Mon has ended up escaping a place like this, understanding early enough that her place is actually with the opposition and with the rebellion. And for her to go through the pain she went through prior just to live a slightly more direction filled life with the rebellion it's a crazy combination. Like they've all gone through these separate experiences, but and especially Dedra. You've lost Cyril. Cyril's dead. Like you have no connection to anyone. Now you're probably gonna have to share share a cell with someone for the rest of your life, as long as Narkina 5 exists.
Well, what I love about it is Denise Goff has basically been like, yeah, like I don't like Dedra. Like I hate Dedra. Like, you could feel bad for Dedra. I still don't like her. It's so funny because a lot of people have to, you hear a lot of interviews where actors say, I gotta empathize with my character. I gotta like my character. I gotta be in his shoes, sort of thing. But I like their mentality of like, just because I can like play the character and I understand the motivations, like doesn't mean I have to like her. It's like I hate that character. I'm glad she got what she deserved, which I thought was so interesting for her to say. But so she was sort of just as satisfied with the ending as a lot of other people were. One thing I will say about that Krennic interaction is he's just hamming it up. But besides like the grabbing of the neck at the end and be like, I think we'll just get on fine without you. It was crazy. Like, and then he just walks away. The ultimate power move in the entire show, one of the coolest scenes in the entire show, is when the index finger goes right on the top of the head. I was like, that was so cool. That was great. That was such an unexpected thing to see from anyone in any series, to put a
She
finger
wasn't
on the top of
expecting it.
someone's head. That is such like a abuse of personal space in a way I have never seen. And that was great. That was a great choice by Ben Mendelsohn.
Oh my gosh, shout out Ben Mendelsohn. I mean, an absolute star of Rogue One. Like, I love Ben Mendelsohn so much. And the fact they were able to use him so sparingly in the show, yet he be like, we talked about it before, like, oh my gosh, he's only in like a quarter of the episodes, but like he's such like a figure in all of them that he's in. But yeah, great point on that, because honestly, like I love that one Denise Goff interview where she's like, look, I had no clue he was gonna do that. I got chills as Denise Goff down my spine when he touched my head like that. And she's like, Dedra's had to put up with a lot of people invading her personal space. But no better way to end this than with understanding and feeling whole lot of emotions. I already know I was like, wow, what a journey we ended up on when Cassian is marching towards mixing it up on Jeddah, getting in with the Ursos. Like we go directly into Rogue One. The connection between this series and Rogue One, and how Tony Gilroy was not kidding when he was like, you just go in and it's going to feel like a slightly more cinematic version than what you just watched. Like we said earlier, even the music gets more cinematic leading in to Rogue One, because the Rogue One music is like any kind of Star Wars type quality that you get from any of their soundtracks, like in a movie theater. Like, it's always going to be a little different when it's the show versus the cinema. But the fact that they even went the extra mile to be like, we're going to increase the use of orchestral instruments in our final few episodes of the series versus like electronic music, which they utilize a lot throughout the series, just to give that feeling like, yeah, this does lead into that, which leads into A New Hope, which, et cetera, et cetera. It's super beautiful. But even on top of all that, the real ending point of this is finding out that Bix and Cassian had a child. And to have them staring out at the sunset is crazy. Like, just anything, like any bit of life out of Mina Rao. Like when Vel said to Cassian, you really should check in with them, it'd be hard for me to believe that Vel didn't know that that's Cassian's kid. And that's kind of why part of the reason Bix left to begin with, probably.
Yeah, I love that, in that whole like Cassian walkout scene, because also he's like he also like looks at the Force healer and gives a little nod of approval, being like, I get it, like I get what you were saying, like I feel the purpose now. And I love that it's like you see all the pieces like coming into place, like you said, like Forrest Whitaker, Saw Gerrera is looking out at the Star Destroyer that he has agitated on Jeddah, knowing, because you know what's going to happen next with that. Then you see Krennic looking out at the final assembly of the Death Star, which is completed in Rogue One. Then you see Dedra in prison, and then you see Clea looking out at the base and at the people, the troops sort of training. And then Cassian is walking past everyone, and it's kind of like where you can sort of celebrate, and like he can sort of like take in, like, this is what we've built together. This is what I've helped build. Like now we're doing the thing. This is like the most important mission. What we're about to do is like the most important mission we've ever been on. And like, we're ready. Like, I'm ready for this. We're going to find Galen Erso. In this case, rescue Jyn Erso, which is not mentioned, but we're going to do this thing. We're going to get this intel, and we're going to go into Rogue One. We're going to do this thing. I'm ready. Like my morals are set.
Cassian put on the jacket and it was time for business.
Yeah.
And what's fun is that that's technically not the last time he's gonna be on Yavin. Like, he come back, they're gonna have their little speech. Mon's gonna have a little bit of a give and take. Same with Bale. But we've come to the end. Not only Andor, one of the greatest series that I've ever seen. I mean, I'll say it right now. I'm just gonna jump into it because we've been 3 hours into this for good reason, and I am very tired, as I'm sure you are, Chris.
Oh yes, I think we've reached the end, just like the show. Yeah.
Andor seasons 1 and 2, but especially season 2, I think is a perfect season of television. If I could have a top 5, top 4 TV shows of all time, for me, it's Andor's on there. Obviously, it's personal taste, but I think this has just become one of those shows that's just going to leave an imprint on my brain for years to come, if not forever. And I look forward to going back and watching more of the movies in a different context, like experiencing what the rebellion truly was outside of the astronomically large figures of the Skywalkers and the Han Solos of the world and the Emperor Palpatines of the world, right? Like, you get bits and pieces of them in this show in really important ways, but the people that matter go beyond even Cassian Andor. who is like, okay, you're making a whole show about Cassian Andor, right? And what could that bring with it? Actually, it brings with it all of the characters that we've lined out above. I'm not going to go through all the names because we've talked about them for 3 hours, but some of the most important people to me now in the Star Wars canon and in the story of Rebellion. Like it's what makes the original trilogy as important as it is. I'm going to go back and I'm going to watch Rogue One a bit more and try to understand what that means to me now. I know you had a chance to do that. We can save the thoughts on Rogue One till later. But Andor is a perfect show to me. The 5 out of 5. It's the best show I've had an opportunity to talk with you about on this podcast of ours, and I hope we revisit talking about it for years to come. I just think it's that good, and Tony Gilroy, man, like, and everyone associated with this show, just thank you for giving us some of the best Star Wars and some of the best TV I've ever seen in my life.
The last thing I'll say is, I'll echo 5 out of 5, and it's so interesting because it's a lesson. It kind of enhances a lesson or a moral that The Last Jedi sort of hints at as well, is that like The Last Jedi is anyone can use the Force, but Andor's is even more general. It's like anyone can make a difference, sort of thing. Like I said, the title of the show is Andor, but there's just so many people that play like their own small parts in something that's like, they're all contributing to something much bigger than themselves, and you don't need to be a part of a lineage that can use the Force and it feels like it's destiny. You don't have to wield a lightsaber or have a special power or a special weapon to make a difference. There's a lot of like small cogs in the machine, and the people doing the little bit that they can to sort of make a difference. And again, that runs sort of antithetical to a lot of what the Star Wars shows are about, where you have to be special. And I think that's sort of, again, as great as a lot of those projects are, that's kind of the wrong lesson, I think. And I think that this show sort of gets down to, again, it makes the Star Wars world feel more like alive, and like there's people in it, and there's people out there that are like, going through day-to-day things, and they're like working hard. And in the certain case of Andor and everyone he's associated with, they want to make a difference. They want to do something. And with little resources they can, they all do it. And I think that's great.
Chris, buddy pal, that's been another episode of Pinoys versus the World, y'all. Thank you for listening. As always, this is executively produced by Jonas Hilseth. Good luck on this one, bro. Music by Jonas Hilseth. And logo by Camille Naputo. Thank you again for sticking with us with this megapod for Andor, one of our favorites. I'm going to close out by saying my name is Harald Hilseth.
My name is Chris Ankiko.
Oh, I'm recording when I say it. And may the Force be with you. We'll talk to you all in the next one. Peace.